You know, Len is a brilliant guy. Intellect off the scale. A heart about this big. But it's most important when you have a huge intellect, not just to have it, but how you put it to work, what you do with it. Now, Len has traditionally chosen to use his intellect to educate all of us about health problems. He's exposing industry, professional, and even government lies and corruptions and profit motives that allow a handful of medical products and practices to flourish that are not good for us. But today at this conference, Len is directing his intellect in the direction of a possible new bad guy. Now, I haven't read his new book yet, so I'm going to approach this new material with an open mind. Let's now explore DNA, Pirates of the Sacred Soul, with Dr. Len Horowitz.
Thank you. So this work is based on, for many of you who have been following my work over the years, DNA, Pirates of the Sacred Spiral, is the slam dunk using hard, cold science that basically declares that we are spiritual beings long before physical. Before we physically manifest into a quantum field of consciousness as a bioholographic projection of divinity, essentially it's all coming down from the heavens virtually, from the master conductor, master composer of the universal orchestra that's virtually singing love songs to every species simultaneously, uplifting everything, including all organic matter, all life. And so, as an introduction to this presentation, as a mess up, if you think that we are cool and hot and have great egos and are just producing wonderful things on this planet as a great tribute to who we are as human beings, you know, compared to the great Creator, we are nothing. So this presentation, you will learn that there has been obviously nefarious tinkering with human genetics and virtually every other technology on the planet. And it befits a massive alien conspiracy. The word alien I placed in quotes here. We'll talk a little bit about why. Scientific advances in electrogenetics explains humanity's fundamental spirituality, the source of life's physical manifestation in a quantum field, as I've just mentioned. Controlling genetic biodynamics assures mass population control, the fundamental bottom line of what's going on, and places earthly evolution and its species selection in the hands of obviously cruel and inhuman, arguably alien leaders. The purpose of this presentation is to free humanity from those inhumans. For they are much like the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. If you pull back their curtains of mass deception, mass-mediated deception, and expose them with the truth, then they lose their fear-inducing power, their corrupt control, ultimately freeing us, you and I, our loved ones, families, communities, extended families, freeing us to live our lives fully, not simply as humans, the dumbed-down slaves, but as superhumans. This presentation is dedicated to this and to singing a new song, as in Revelation 14:1. It is dedicated to the rapidly increasing masses of people who feel something extraordinary is taking place spiritually within us, within our hearts, within our friends and family. Synchronicities of experiences, knowing that we're surfing the wave, the great ocean wave of divinity. Miracles are happening in our lives. This is the purpose of this presentation. It's dedicated to singing this new song. The love, vibration, harmony to facilitate the great paradigm shift. Now, as introduction, let's go into Webster's dictionary just so that we can define some of the terms. For those of you who have read the book, Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse, you know we followed some codes in Webster, and it blew our minds. There's a section called the Mind Blower. You see, Noah Webster was a highest level Freemason. He created the Webster's Dictionary based on the codes in the Bible, and coded Webster's Dictionary with codes based on the fact that he knew that the Bible was encoded. And so when we read now Webster's Dictionary, it's not simply looking for the definition. The greatest information really comes from following the codes and the derivation of the words. So if we look up human, it says homo, human being, more at homage, 14th century when the Anglo-Saxons created the English language. So it was one of the first words. Of or relating to or characteristic of human beings, susceptible to or representative of sympathies and frailties of human nature. Well, that can be a broad-based dysfunction or an empathetic human or humane function. It says, when you look up homage, however, more at humble, interestingly enough. 14th century again, same time. It says a feudal ceremony by which a man acknowledges himself the vassal, servant, or slave of a lord. Humble is further defined, 14th century, to make humble in spirit or manner. Why would you want to make spirit humble? Spirit is everything. It is the basis for everything. Why would you want to manipulate that spirit in any way, particularly this way, to destroy the power, the independence, or the prestige of a human being? It's directly out of Webster's. Inhuman is defined as lacking pity, kindness, or mercy, savage, cold, impersonal, not conforming to the needs of human beings, or suggesting a non-human class of beings. To gauge this level of inhumanity or alienism, the fact that you're listening to a behavioral scientist, Harvard degreed, I think I bring some expertise to the field of examining human behavior and judging or not whether it is evil or good, moral or not. Evil is defined in Webster's as morally reprehensible, sinful, wicked, arising from actual or imputed bad character or conduct, an inferior, causing discomfort or repulsion, offensive, causing harm, a cosmic evil force, something that brings sorrow, distress, and calamity, versus good, bountiful, fertile, true, deserving of respect, honorable, virtuous, right, commendable, kind, benevolent, loyal, something conforming to moral order of the universe. And then humane, marked by compassion, sympathy, or consideration for humans and animals, characterized by or tending to broad humanistic culture. So when we consider good versus evil behavior as professionals or simply as intelligent laypersons, by what means can we measure good versus evil? Well, the Bible tells us we can know them by the fruits or the fruit of their labor. So what is the fruit of the labor of the military, medical, petrochemical, pharmaceutical cartel? The global genocidalists. Genocide, defined in Webster as the mass killing of people for economic, political, and or ideological reasons, simply because they feel that populations are easier to control if there's less people. Environmental destruction and degradation, cultural degradation, psychosocial control through fear, economic worship and slavery, pharmaceutical dependence and toxicity, national plunder, political and civil corruption, water poisoning, air pollution and poisoning, blood contaminations. These are the fruit of those who control this planet. If you look at the North Americans, the plight of the native North American, it lays out what is done typically on this planet to spiritually highly evolved human beings who have a love in their heart for not only humanity, but for the Great Spirit. If you look at what's going on in Hawaii today, where I live now, I've been blessed to be there to do some wonderful work. Did you know that right now there are approximately 8,000 native Hawaiians remaining on the Hawaiian Islands? That's it. The Armenian genocide, the African genocide, AIDS, spiritually attuned, divinely faithful, get targeted. South Americans and many, many other genocides. Environmental destruction is an earmark of evil. It is an earmark of inhumane, insane, immoral, reprehensible, malicious behavior. It is not loving. It is not considerate. It's not even rational, based on all science. Deforestation, petrochemical dumping, air pollution, waste generation, landfill dumping, not living in tune with nature but against it. That is alien to humanity. Cultural degradation, the sex, drugs, and rock and war cult, the British invasion. If you know the history of CIA operative Charlie Manson, and if you watched the Super Bowl, you were probably appalled, as I was, at the main theme of the halftime concert conducted by Sir, knighted, Paul McCartney. This was, after all, Super Bowl 39. The theme was, the message was, in the midst of America's military might and nationalism, rah, rah, USA for the world to see, one of the most televised productions in all of history, with the sound quality of McCartney and band being unsurpassed. The theme, big message, the height of the energy, with a big explosion, was the music from Live and Let Die. Ian Fleming, who was from the beginning of his career a British Secret Service agent and operative, writing the entire genre of James Bond novels. Live and Let Die, where the music says, we used to say, live and let live. You know we did. But in this ever-changing world in which we live in, makes us give it a try to live and let die as we conduct our war on terrorism around the planet on behalf of the British oligarchy and the European banksters. Now, in the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse, we presented the original musical scale, the ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Third note, miragistorum, miracles. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We talked about in this book and revealed the alphanumerics of the English language, and then we advanced the fact that English is a perfect spiritual language, except that it's been flipped 100%, completely around. It was derived from Hebrew, one of the ancient sacred languages, ancient Aramaic, Hebrew, Sanskrit, had a resonance to it, a vibrational essence to it that moved matter, like in the work called cymatics, in the science of cymatics, the effects of sound on matter. We learned that English was done, basically, created in the 14th century, when human was defined, to dumb us down, to dumb humanity down. Using the model in the Bible, the Babylon, you confuse the languages and you get a chance to disempower people. So we showed this to you in Healing Codes, and when I took my next steps, both in the Healing Celebrations material and then publishing 3 months before September 11th, the book, Death in the Air, Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare, where I decoded the British Secret Service's alphanumeric codes. They represent MI6, primarily Miracle 6, derived from the third note of the ancient musical scale we're going to talk about, including the 528 frequency. Well, turns out that the code, using their code, that the X's stand for sixes. So that 666 or XXX is triple adult entertainment, triple X is 666. The reason why you play tic-tac-toe with X's and O's, both O's and X's are sixes. So by the time you're done, the entire board is filled up with 666, 666, 666. So interestingly enough, the derivation of the royal flag from the Rosicrucian-related sacred symbol, the Red Cross. Red Cross, now controlled blood industry by Rockefellers, got money from Rothschilds. Ultimately, Rothschild, you know the history if you've read our previous works and many other esteemed authors. The mysterious Templar fleet disappeared. Where'd the money go? Well, you follow it to become the pirates of the oceans. And ultimately, if you take the flag itself and you divide it into quarters and rotate each quarter precisely 90 degrees, you come up with the Nazi swastika by no accident. So when you begin to look at genetics and DNA and you begin to look at the infiltration in this science of these devil doers, and you look at in the New York Public Library, for example, you see the secret of life, the DNA story in New York, the evolution in New York of the entire genetics, but first eugenics agenda, scientific investigation of genetic differences between the races, including the genetic predispositions for diseases between the races, because it was funded largely by the Rockefellers and Bush, Prescott Bush family, the Whitneys, the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, those who were of wealth and power decided that it was a great threat. And this is even told to you by way of the information on the internet right now presented to you by the authorities, that they were afraid that their wealth and control would be eliminated by the rapid growth of populations, particularly of the ethnic populations coming to America. So they created this entire project. Now, what's interesting for me is when I look at this particular cover from the New York Public Library exhibit, you don't only just see Cold Springs Harbor Laboratory logo, which was where they conducted this research, you see the royal family symbol, the crown, and the lion, and the Rockefeller University symbol side by side. And if you ask why would that be, you can begin to get the answers, such as the Rockefeller partner in cancer devil doing, Alfred P. Sloan, royalty, control of General Motors fame, Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. He says, quote, more effective techniques. This was Everett Case, president of the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, said in 1968. He said, quote, more effective techniques for the control of population growth are at hand now. The genetic code has been deciphered. Well, I thought they just did that the other day. This is 1968. The genetic code has been deciphered, and the elements of DNA can now be synthetically made. Science, whatever its problems, including the apprehension that we, the public, have, and the revulsion against it, and its untoward consequences, is an enterprise that they take. It's too dynamic to be turned off. Second warning, Zbigniew Brzezinski, early warnings now. It's from the early 70s. David Rockefeller protege, he says, power will gravitate into the hands of those who control information. The information I'm going to be sharing with you is the most powerful information that has been released in 3,000 years. They've controlled it. They don't want you to have it. Because they're entering now, particularly an important technotronic era, a dictatorship. Looking ahead into the future, the end of the century, which is now, the possibility of biochemical mind control and genetic tinkering with man, including beings, which will function like men and reason like them as well, could give rise to some difficult questions. Creation of beings, discussed in the early 70s by the major industrialists. The psychosocial control that's taking place, is that an indicator for humanity and humaneness? Or is it an indicator of insanity and cruelty? Where's the empathy in the fear factor? spreading anthrax. The cancer industry spreading cancer-inducing toxins throughout the environment and our food supplies and our water supplies. And the terrorism, where is the humanity in all of this? The terrorization of the culture. Now, a colleague of mine, Stephen Kunitz, when I graduated from the University of Rochester in New York, actually left there, I never graduated from Rochester. I went to work at Harvard right after Rochester, but there was a fellow there by the name of Stephen Kunitz, who today is America's leading medical sociologist. We both studied under Andrew Sorensen, fabulous instructor. He wrote, and even in the American Journal of Public Health, about globalization and the profoundly deleterious effects it was having on native populations globally. In fact, he even said, where you have WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant infiltration by controlling corporations, it is proceeding of genocide of indigenous people. In the esteemed Journal of Public Health. Gives numerous examples. In Brazil, the corporate cash flow left 6 Aboriginal tribes extinct. Is this a foreshadowing of the human extinction, the extinction of our species? As particularly we're engaged in a spiritual renaissance? He says between the early 1900s and 1957, the Indian population declined from about 1 million to less than 200,000, due largely to pastoral expansion. He wrote of 13 other tribes, and then of 59 tribes, all destroyed. Brazilian mining sector merged with the military government, a number of multinational corporations, he reported. Here from Denver Airport, the murals depicting the global genocide and who's behind it. You can use it as an artistic, creative measure of aliens, the alien agenda. Here you have a Nazi alien, a gas-masked Nazi alien sticking the Christian symbol dove of peace with his saber, which is a Muslim sword. It's the Muslim weapon sticking the Christian symbol for global politics and economics. Notice the swath trail that this saber leaves behind is multicolored rainbow electromagnetic frequencies, also etheric, also associated with a spraying of the atmosphere with lethal toxins such as chemical sprays and chemtrails. And as a result, you have dying people, mostly ethnic populations. Destruction. Get a close look at the alien face. Gas masks, immune to the toxic waste and exposures the alien is. These people are not. You and I, by and large, are not, unless you are potentially an alien or non-human. Here is the great tribute to the extinct species. Notice background of horrific destruction and despair in the remaining children. You don't see adults here, except for in the coffins up front. Here you have representing not only the great spiritual temple of Mu, the understanding of the ancient civilizations to the spiritual qualities in nature, and the sea turtle was right in the temple of Mu, right in the fore entryway of the temple of Mu. And here you have lying dead, representing the great African natives, beautiful black woman in her coffin. In the center, you have the native North American woman, deceased. And in the right-hand corner, you have a Christian Jew clutching to her heart the symbols of Christianity and Judaism, separated by the rose croix, the rose, red rose, symbolic of the Rosicrucians that divide the sheeple to conquer the flock. Lying on an American quilt. And by the way, that flower that you see above her head is a columbine flower. The symbol that you're looking at, AUAG, stands for, in the scientific literature, silver and gold. But also AUAG stands for Australian antigen. This is in the floor between these murals in Denver Airport. If you're mining for the silver and gold for population control, you would then turn to, as Henry Kissinger did, the Australian antigen, AUAG, in the scientific literature. We exposed this in the book Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola, Nature, Accident, or Intentional. And we exposed, you're looking at it, the United States government contract under which numerous AIDS-like and Ebola-like viruses were bioengineered by Lytton Bionetics, the Army's 6th top biological weapons contracting lab, and whose name do you see there? This is a 1971 document. You see Dr. Robert Gallo, the National Cancer Institute project officer overseeing the entire project. This was the man who, almost 15 years later, was credited for having discovered the AIDS virus. What they didn't tell you was that they created numerous viruses that were virtually identical, by definition and function, to HIV/AIDS. This is a Masonic conspiracy. It's an alien conspiracy, but it's a secret society conspiracy. That's who dedicated Denver's New World Airport. From the book Death in the Air, Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare, here you see one of the pages of the 16-color gallery of art that we reprinted from the Illuminati's galleries. You're seeing a British-American warlord here riding the debilitated skeleton, riding the back of a debilitated Judeo-Christian skeleton. Look in his left hand. He holds like a carrot on a stick the symbols of a Star of David and a cross. In his right hand, he holds an electrical device, a transmitter that beams frequencies to control the wind power over America. Just like the jet stream today is being completely misregulated in order to induce weather changes and economic tragedies so that federal emergency managers working on behalf of the global industrialists can take fascist control over this as well as the world's nations. So is this moral? Is this human or is this alien? Define morality. Moral means of or relating to principles of right or wrong in behavior. Ethical, conforming to a standard of right behavior, sanctioned by or operative on one's conscience or ethical judgment. Synonyms include ethical, virtuous, righteous, noble, mean of conforming to a standard of what is good or right. Or is it alien, defined as belonging or relating to another person, place, or thing, strange, foreign, differing in nature or character, typically to the point of incompatibility. A person of another family, race, or nation, extraterrestrial, belonging or relating to another person. There he is. And so who are we? Naive children. These are my beautiful little girls, Elena and Aria, holding a little goat. We are so naive and ignorant of the truth, especially regarding DNA and its empowering aspects, its spiritual qualities. And this, among all else, is among the greatest inhuman perversions that's ever been perpetrated. The Messiah, Yeshua, said, "The kingdom of heaven is near." As an advanced metaphysician, he did not mean temporally far off in time. He meant that we are standing in it. The kingdom of heaven is right here, right now. It's an electromagnetic frequency matrix that we have the choice to be in and love or to leave instantly. We go into our heads as ego-centered lunatics in fear. We leave that heavenly kingdom by choice. He said that my people die of lack of applied knowledge. This is the lack of applied knowledge that we're talking about, that he was talking about. And that the truth of this has the capacity to set them free. He also said, forgive them because the energy of hate is inhuman. It's insuperhuman. Here's the goat, the symbol of the goat. The Baphomet does not want you to know that your physical body is a crystallization or precipitation of love vibrations, that the electromagnetic and bioacoustic frequencies of creative energy move physical matter along paths of least resistance to flow into sacred geometric forms, and we perceive these forms as our physical reality. Now, this optimally freeing knowledge can be used for personal empowerment, psycho-spiritual development, and global healing. Alternatively, secreting this knowledge from humanity and applying this ancient, advanced technology for population control assures enslavement, even destruction of the human race and myriad other species. So, are we really looking at an alien conspiracy by definition, strict definition in Webster's? I think we are. The destruction and the indicators of it are all around us. Where was the son of a bush when we needed him most? Where was he? He was reading My Pet Goat to a class of school children. In previous works, if you go on the internet at www.tetrahedron.org, the publishing company I've been privileged to direct for many years since 1978, there's a special report, you can read it. I solved the mystery of the anthrax investigation on behalf of the Creator and on behalf of the people, the American people particularly. When you follow the entire military-industrial chart of suspects, the contractors linked to who made the money, on whose behalf was it most beneficial to spread the fear and the anthrax, you come to realize the links, intimate links, administratively and financially between the Bush administration and the pharmaceutical industrials, from pharma, obviously the CIA that pressed the FBI to not figure out who was doing the mailings, but it was pretty simple. The only source for that particular strain, that unique strain, came from Battelle Memorial Institute. And that they were connected through the Genomic Research Center, Institute for Genomic Research, to the main implicators of global devil-doing, the perpetrators of global devil-doing, that is, the Carlyle Group, which in Michael Moore's film played a central role. The Bin Laden family, Bush family, Frank Carlucci III, CIA director overseeing Portugal and Africa at the time they released the AIDS virus, as the director of Carlyle, the 11th top military contractor in the United States, who just last week bought out Verizon Hawaii, so that every phone call we make now in Hawaii, I mean, my phones were always tapped. I mean, my phones have been tapped for a long time. I assume I'm speaking to a CIA operative every time I make a phone call. But in terms of the entire population of Hawaii now, this is the group that oversees now Verizon. The connections between Bioport, the vaccine manufacturer, the Bayer Corporation, makers of Cipro, the people who made the money off of the anthrax fright, to push through the legislation, the totalitarian control of the American population through the Homeland Insecurity Act. Everything's flipped. They tell you Centers for Disease Creation. It's actually, they tell you Centers for Disease Control is actually Centers for Disease Creation. Whenever they say something is positive in a title of whatever they're doing, you can assume it's alien. The connections between these companies are very, very clear. Is this for the benefit of humanity, or is it an alien agenda? The Anglo-Americans are tinkering with humanity. Battelle and Argonne National Laboratories and the Genomics for Life project, in fact, is directed by, as the Human Genome Project was, the United States Department of Energy and the London Trust. Excuse me, that's interesting. Why would that be? Why would the Department of Energy be involved in genetics? Because as you'll learn shortly, DNA is an antenna to the Creator. It is the most empowering element within our bodies. And if you look at past history, the Department of Energy, what their involvement has been in health sciences, you see that they're the creators of numerous AIDS viruses, Ebola viruses, lymphoma viruses, leukemia viruses. In fact, in the book Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola, I published the documents that proved back in the 1970s they created airborne leukemia viruses that could spread leukemia by sneezing. Is that sane or is that insane? Even in the concept of war. Today you're told airborne threat, major airborne threat is flu. So elderly particularly, go get your flu vaccines for free. Come get your free vaccines. What do you get for free today? Genocide. So the Anglo-American genome thieves, who really, we showed you in the book DNA Pirates of the Sacred Spiral, they heisted the project just upon its completion, privatized the whole thing. Now the patents are going mostly to Rockefeller University. Patents over what? Over life. Farmer suddenly sees in his field new plants growing. He goes over, investigates. It turns out that a truck carrying Monsanto seeds suddenly blew off the truck, starts to implant itself in his soil. And guess who loses? Genetically modified seeds in his organic, non-modified crops suddenly begin, through the bees transferring the pollens, to infect his organic crop. Guess who loses? The lawsuit was lost by the farmer. Monsanto declared, since they had a patent on it, he illegally grew their patented variety of seeds without paying them. The Terminator gene, you hear about that? Terminate life. Terminate what God created us, was ongoing bounty for future harvests as seeds that self-replicate. Why would the energy industrialists desire to have this amount of control over the human genomic technology? Because that's the seat of spiritual energy. And this is not against flesh and blood with whom we do battle. It is alien at minimum, and it is spiritual warfare. So let's give you some more background about the antenna to the Creator. In Healing Celebrations, we shared with you some wonderfully uplifting information about how to use your innate capacity to miraculously heal. We talked about the science of cymatics. We talked about sacred geometry. You see Stan Tenon's work here with Hebrew language, and Dan Winter and Melchizedek's brilliant work looking at the evolution of organic structures through sacred geometric forms. Previous works in the field of philosophy and theology have now been confirmed by science. Duncan Rhodes, who's a colleague of ours, many people here know him well, for the Nexus magazine that he puts out faithfully, and many of the wonderful articles he's shared, including Les Wales' material on the Bach Saga, where the ancient stories of how the Creator worked to create through the sounds of music and harmonies. Science is now showing us that DNA is a way of relaying these waves, particles of light and sound, photons and phonons, they call it in science, throughout we, the organisms. And it also explains how things like homeopathic medicines work, how Bach flowers work. A couple drops under the tongue, and if you close your eyes at all, your energy or spiritually sensitive, you can feel this incredible movement of energy flow through your body to oust the aberrant energies of whatever virus or bacteria that's trying to take hold over your immune system. And it's a virtually instantaneous effect that you cannot explain by chemical processes, by physiological processes. The movement of these energies occurs so quickly that it is simply a spiritual phenomenon versus a physical phenomenon. The book of Genesis lays out beautifully. In the beginning, the Creator, I won't use God because the word God I'll substitute for the Bible. I know you're not supposed to do that, but I don't particularly trust King James. At any rate, thank you. I won't use the word God or dog spelled backwards. Again, when you recognize English language as a flip, I believe that that word, deriving from Gad, a pagan god, deity, is not by accident. In the beginning, Yah, created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of Yah moved upon the face of the waters. The Spirit of the Creator moved upon the face of the waters. So in the beginning, all you had was the Creator, the Word, which was sound. Sound is an electromagnetic frequency. What's that? Simply mathematics and physics. The Creator's language is math. And there was water at the time. So there's three things. You got Spirit, Yah, the Creator, and water. And the Creator and the Word are one. The Spirit, the Creator, and the Word are one. And apparently the water was there. And Yah said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And Yah divided the light from the darkness. That is, the Creator divided between the light and between the darkness. Explains the Amplified King James Bible. Yah said, "Let there be a dome in the middle of the water. Let it divide the water from the water." Interesting when you, in physics, begin to think about the concept of dividing molecular water from molecular water, wherein you then enter into another dimension, a quantum field, a matrix of energy. And Yah called that dome sky, or the firmament. Yah said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear." So the land, the physical matter, came out of the water along with the light and the Spirit. And that is how it was, says Genesis. So let's go into quickly hydrogen and oxygen, the elements of water. Linking hydrogen and oxygen or water to the first light, as the Bible does, makes complete scientific sense. After all, natural light comes from the sun. The sun contains more than 99.8% of the total mass of our entire solar system. Furthermore, researchers record about 75% of the sun's mass is hydrogen, and the rest is almost all helium. Everything else, a little bit, 0.1%, a few metals. And what's interesting also to me is that the sun converts hydrogen to helium. So almost everything derives from the Creator's power and influence on hydrogen. The initial creative element is hydrogen. The principal element, it is responsible for light. The same hydrogen that forms the majority of every water molecule, and most of your body is water. Quantum physicists study the creation of light by rearranging electron particles in orbit around elements such as hydrogen and oxygen. They further deduce the space between subatomic particles is much like a firmament of ether, the electromagnetic multidimensional background matrix of the universe. Atomic hydrogen, along with oxygen, is most sensitive to sound. Assuming that the Creator's orchestra is always playing, when a human enzyme group, for example, is struck by sound, work is achieved primarily due to the sacred geometry of the molecules, their energy-carrying capacities, and the resonance dynamics of its hydrogen. Why is that important? Because enzymes direct and empower every metabolic reaction in your body. Dr. Fred Bell, who's a friend and colleague, submits that when a sacred sound is close to the right frequency of the body's vibratory rhythm, the hydrogen atom facilitates energy in the form of frequencies to enter and be conducted through the body. He further says, quote, "In the morning, as the sun rises, the energy comes from the astral plane into the hydrogen atoms in our body. Its various frequencies shower these hydrogen atoms like a rainbow, like you saw in the Denver airport mural. The red end of the spectrum rainbow reaches the nucleus of the hydrogen atom. The other end, which would be violet, is felt strongly by the electron, the outer perimeter revolving particle within a smaller mass. The hydrogen atom is more than a proton and an electron, which this rainbow energy animates. This is how we as humans are spiritually animated. This is precisely the primary function of hydrogen and oxygen atoms. These carry etheric firmamental energy or spirituality into our cells, and this is what lifts us up and animates us within this matrix of water. This universal matrix of water, I should say. The Creator's element is oxygen. I say that because in the book, Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse, we showed you that the infinity sign, number 8, was the Creator's number. The English words God, dog spelled backwards, faith, and trust are all 8s, not by accident. Read the book, you'll learn more. But the Hebrew name for Yah, or God, is Yahvah or Yahweh. It was sound differently back in the old days. I simply use Yah because to me it's the best that I've heard, the clearest and the least likely to send out an aberrant frequency or a dissonant frequency of energy. It is the closest that I know to the truth of what the Creator's name is. What does the Creator's name mean? Well, first of all, it comes from the Bible again. Where did we know? Yod, He, Vav, He, Yahweh, Yahweh. Where did that come from in the Bible? Moses was told at the burning bush, the Creator's name. He says, I am that I am the tetragrammaton. Tetragrammaton, a sacred geometric form indicating the tetrahedron of today. And it means, literally translated, to breathe is to exist. Many of the ancient names declare the Creator's presence. My name, Arya, Lion of Yah, Isaiah. Many of these ancient names had this frequency, vibration of tone. Creator creates through the spoken words, we're told. We're holy children of the Creator. We're given lips to articulate the frequencies of sound, to be powerful co-creators in this quantum field. Messiah said, you shall be judged by every word that comes out of your mouth. It either reflects the goodness and glory in your heart or the evil that dwells therein. And because the kingdom of heaven is near, the electromagnetic matrix field of this universe is right here, and we're empowering it as co-creators. The manifestation is not simply in our water temple. The frequency vibrations of those articulations come into our own spiritual abode and dramatically change the structuring of water and the operation of hormones and enzyme groups. We're going to talk about this. Prana, the breath of life. Throughout all civilizations, this understanding was held by the wise, by the ancients, by the elders. The creative breath, or spirit of life, is actually reflected in the English words that we still use today. Inspiration, inspiritualization, bringing in the spirit. Respiration, re-spiritualization, when we respire, when we move that air through our lungs, and then bless the blood. So this should inspire you to practice some deep abdominal breathing. Oxygen purification. This is from Ed McCabe's wonderful work, Flood Your Body with Oxygen, is central to global purification cycles, also involving water and ozone. O3 ozone is so energetic, it constantly wants to become stable O2 oxygen, giving up an O1. That's what makes it useful in healing. All those little single oxygen forms create a cascade of O1 releases, negative air ionizations. All of these things are charged to help promote healing and to do healing work, to balance the energy. Energy balancing is the fundamental basis for healing. Not pharmaceutical sorcery, drug-induced genocide. So that this is what gets rid of the negativity in our body, the toxins in our body, all of these energetic processes. Interestingly, the hemoglobin, if you look at your red blood cells, which are in the shape of a toroid, I'm going to show you the mathematics of that in a couple minutes. The hemoglobin is part of a healthy person's red blood cells, holds between 97% to 100% oxygen, depending on the purity of the air or oxygen consumed. Oxygen partial pressure, or PO2, the dissolved oxygen level in your bloodstream, drops with infections, injuries, and illnesses. Red blood cells are composed largely of hemoglobin, which is made up of hemes. Now look at the spiraling tetrahedral structures of the hemoglobin groups. One heme has 4 octahedrons, pyramid shapes of iron, and is surrounded by hundreds of enzymes. The iron molecules are stacked in line, forming 2 alpha and 2 beta chains, as shown. This is, again, from Dr. Fred Bell's wonderful work. The hemoglobin component of RBCs, like DNA, like all the proteins in your body, are spiraled. Why? You remember Tesla, Nikola Tesla, the Tesla coil? The coils act as an energy enhancer. Everything in your body, the physical nature of your body, are based on sacred geometry. It's all in spirals to enhance your spirituality. That is, it is designed by the sound of nature's voice or the sacred orchestra to attract and transmit optimal amounts of oxygen and energy for its amazingly small size. It is unbelievable. So DNA and hemoglobin are both structurally and functionally influenced by cosmic energy as well as by electromagnetic charges surrounding the Earth's atmosphere. Research shows that 90% of your biological energy comes from oxygen. Likewise, optimal healing of tissues depends on oxygen levels. Many naturopathic doctors say if you can get your PO2 up to rise above 100 millimeters mercury, you could prompt healing. You even had Peter Jennings on the news show you what happens when you take paraplegics into oxygenation tents and chambers, hyperbaric oxygenation chambers, miraculous nervous regeneration and healing. In a normal room, however, oxygen tension is only about 19 to 21%. And for this reason, many clinicians administer oxygen in various forms. Now look at the philosophical and the derivations of the words oxygen. The roots, again, Webster's Dictionary, relate to DNA's primary function. In creationism, oxy, relating to sharp or acid it comes from, and gen, G-E-N, pertaining to information, producer born to become. So when we look at oxygen, it is a sharp information producer, relaying the spirituality through the water molecules. The electromagnetic energy is stored and moved in this way. Now let's look at the definition from Webster's again of electromagnetism. It's defined as, quote, a fundamental physical force that is responsible for interactions between charged particles which occur because of their charge and for emission and absorption of photons or light energy. So, therefore, everything physical, composed of atoms and subatomic particles that interact because of this electromagnetic phenomenon. One might say that electromagnetism and water is fundamentally responsible for all of life and everything in the physical universe. It is also characteristic of ether, the spiritual force or energy from which all matter precipitates. Now, in Hilo, Hawaii, the other day, we were blessed by a visit from Dr. Emoto, who is the Japanese doctor who is now on the New York Times bestseller list. His book, The Message from Water, I think was last week 13th on the list. And his message from water is that not only does water relay love signals, but is receptive to love signals and even language. Dr. Emoto places on water containers to change the structure, and he's taken magnificent photographs of water, saying if you simply put the words love and thanks on a glass of water, the loving intent of those words actually carries the frequency into the water, begins to rearrange the molecular structures, creating what's called structured water. And he thanks a good friend of mine, Dr. Lee Lorenzen, who I worked with years ago with regard to the first clustered water that was produced and sold. And I remember sitting at a table with Dr. Lorenzen years ago, and when we first had, this was 1999, we just had the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse just come off the press. And I said to Lee, you know, we just produced the Revelations in 3,000 years of the ancient musical scale, and I said the third note is about miracles. And I said, here's the frequencies, 396, 417, 528. And he starts to laugh when I got to 528. I said, why are you laughing? He says, that happens to be known by the world's leading genetic biochemists as the miraculous repair frequency for damaged DNA. And he said, I put that frequency, nobody knows it, but I put that frequency in my water to bless it. So, the miracle of DNA, Dr. Lorenzen taught me, is that water activates it. DNA exists in a matrix of water. The structured water, or what he called clustered water, has these sacred geometric forms in the tetrahedron structures that combine in 3 dimensions, at least that we know about already, in various sacred geometric forms, just like Melchizedek and Dan Winter show us in their wonderful work, showing how the tetrahedron structures just rotate a little bit. Now you've got from the side the Star of David, and then another addition, another modification of the sacred geometric form, and now you have the Merkaba. And so the DNA, Lorenzen showed us, because he studied the works of very, very intelligent genetic scientists like Ron Sakeley, Department Chairman of Chemistry, University of California, Berkeley, showed that DNA acts as an antenna for cellular upregulation. The primary function they taught us about what DNA is about. It's a receiver and transmitter of photons, light and phonon sound. For what? Cellular upregulation, meaning that their water molecules, the pyramid power around the DNA spiral energizing strands, are taking in the spiritual energy of love vibrations and then sending it out for manifesting, precipitating in a quantum field the physical matter of the body. Here you see from Sakeley's work, published in the Journal of Science, beautifully structured, well-hydrated DNA strands. And associated with these strands are electrical potentials. Now, this is what happens if you simply take as little as 8% of the water, structured water particularly, out of the molecules, out of these DNA molecules. You will see them go like this. They unravel, they fold, they lose their energy too. If you compare one side to the other, you see negative 212 goes down in the left, your left, in the potential at the top, measured. The same exact DNA strand, dehydrated, as little as 8%, produces negative 12 potential. Dramatic reduction in the energy carrying capacity of the gene and the strand, the chromosome. Dr. Emoto's work further showed us that when we pray over water, the water dramatically changes. He showed us when he took photographs of 9 cities, their tap water around the world, and showed us that it looks like raw sewage under 20,000 magnification. When it used to look like a beautiful snowflake, you hit it with chlorine and fluoride and heavy metal toxicity, and you blow out the structures, the magnificence, the spiritual, empowered, energy-carrying capacity of the worlds, the earths, the planets, the universe's probably most sacred fluid, and this is what's called public health. So all of this information has been Masonically censored. We're not told that DNA is an antenna to God. We're told it's simply a protein synthesis template. Messages go from DNA to RNA to the ribosome to produce amino acids, bring proteins together. When they come together, now we build new body parts. Well, you know what? That exists. The Bible says that a half-truth is a complete lie, however. That 3% of the function, 3% of the function is what the authorities tell us DNA is all about, protein synthesis. They call the rest, the 93+%, they call junk DNA. It's junk. Creator made a mistake. It was the Creator's defecation that gave you the rest of your DNA. DNA is the central processing station also for all the electrochemical, the mathematical, the frequency, the bioelectric and spiritual communications throughout your body, the primary regulating instrument for all of life. It is not a toy to be manipulated with toxic waste, pharmaceuticals, or unraveled, just like the AIDS virus does. You know, the gene therapy today is being touted as the savior for modern medicine. What's in store for us is genetopharmaceuticals. That's going to be the saving grace every expert's declaring on behalf of the Illuminati. And you know what gene therapy is? It's taking a bacteria, typically, or a virus, and extracting out of its innards the genetic material, leaving in, it's mostly viruses that's used. In the older days, they used to use bacteria as phages. But now they're using delivery envelopes. Genetic viruses, genetically modified viruses, they take the genetic strands and the any other enzymes material out of that virus, leaving a blank viral envelope. And now they inject into that new virus new DNA, new RNA, whatever they want to put in there. They mass produce it, they culture it, clone it, and then they inject it into experimental subjects, mostly military, blacks, Hispanics in the urban ghetto areas, particularly Kaiser Permanente. Kaiser Permanente goes back to Kaiser Wilhelm, his eugenics-oriented family. And ultimately, what's taking place is the exact process by which the AIDS virus works. It reinfects cells. They throw these new viral envelopes. They inject it into the human beings, mostly children. And what happens is that those viruses then release, they invade, they dock on the cells, they release the new DNA strands, and they hope that it's going to cut out the bad genetics and insert good genetics, the new good genes in. The likelihood that that will be a successful technology is close to nil. Close to nil. And that is what they are basing their entire field of genetopharmaceuticals and gene therapy on. Now, I told you about the red blood cell being the shape of a toroid. I had the privilege of working recently with probably one of the world's, if not the world's, most intelligent, genius mathematician. His name is Marco Rodin. And I gave Marco a page in the new book, DNA Pirates of the Sacred Spiral, because I was floored by his revelations. He studied mathematics and the sacred geometry and physics of the math and the clues from ancient sources that give us a complete new view of the universe. That the patterns, the hidden patterns that he studied, in fact, touch on every part of our reality, from black holes to blood cells. The revelation that these simple mathematical patterns proves the physical manifestation of divine spirit at a most fundamental yet scientifically complex level has now been achieved. Marco Rodin's math is the fundamental basis for the ancient Pythagorean mystery school mathematics. That entire school was suppressed from the masses because it relayed the greatest truths of spirit and of effect on matter through the Creator's language, math, and the perfection of the universe in this way. Using the base 10 number system, according to Marco Rodin, but done in the ancient mystery school Pythagorean math way, with 9 as the zenith and the highest multiple digit integers added to derive their single digit between 1 and 9. 9 is completion. Rodin studied many interesting patterns, and from those patterns, including the doubling of the numbers, beginning with the number 1, yielding the pattern 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5 to infinity, Notice there is no 3 6s and 9s in that pattern. It was Tesla who taught John Keeley, and Royal Raymond Rife, the brilliant genius microscopist, from where we get the Rife therapy machines today. If humanity, Tesla taught, would only knew the powers of the 3s, 6s, and 9s, it would be a completely different world. When dividing by 2, the same pattern that I just shared with you was also produced, but in the reverse direction. So there's a perfection. Now, I apologize for this particular graphic. It didn't transfer well, but we're going to have to get those numbers to you so that you can see, but you can do it yourself. It's a pretty simple process. This process offers a bit of insight into the math underlying nature, balance, polarity, wherein mirroring multiples are evident. Further, Rodin used these patterns to develop the topology of a toroid in which the numbers 3, 9, and 6, not present in the infinity pattern, actually create the fourth dimension and are intimately connected with the matrix in which the math forms the physical precipitation in our universe. Rodin likens this toroidal map to the Creator's fingerprint, since it appears in every facet of the universe. Now, the implications of this mathematical discovery are limitless. One likelihood is the generation of free energy. Many great minds from the fields of physics, biology, chemistry, even computer science have been able to resolve enigmas in their fields by understanding this unique, all-encompassing mathematical system destined to become as intriguing as Fibonacci's sequence and the golden mean. And indeed, they are intimately related. Your essence, therefore, is the sacred spiritual knowledge speaks to your essence in mathematics. You are an energy being. And underlying your genetic function is a facilitation mechanism that transfers your mathematics into your spiritual magnificence and physical form. In other words, you are a magnificent manifestation of crystallized or precipitated light and sound. You're directly connected via this mathematical toroidal matrix to the light and sound of love frequencies of the entire universe, or the energies from the divine source. Call it either one. So let's discuss the practical advancing electrogenetics and healings that are taking place on the planet, at least some of the ones focusing on what we're doing in Hawaii. Many of you might ask, well, how come you dropped out of, you left your radio show, daily radio program, you kind of like you've been off the map. I've gotten a lot of phone calls. What are you doing, Len? We haven't heard from you. What have you been doing? Well, I'll show you some things that we're doing. Merrill Garnett, who's one of my heroes, he's a dentist too, and a PhD, and a cancer researcher, and developed a very effective cancer cure. Unfortunately, it's expensive and it's a pharmaceutical, so it has some limitations. But he is certainly a hero in my book in many, many ways. He wrote, quote, "There is harmony of the organism and harmony in structure that allows the transfer of energy so that the organism can live and vibrate, so it can carry on its metabolism and its replication. Those harmonies and resonances must be perceived as inherently musical because those harmonies recur and create the organism. Ultimately, there is a musical or harmonic element within the organism which can recreate the patterns of information and energy. And this is beautiful and resurgent. This is molecular music, fragile, dependent, recurring under the right conditions based in quantum echoes and hidden physics." You're looking at the Aloha Hot Pool at this project that I've, for the last year, labored with tremendous love to help develop on behalf of the Creator and as a model to humanity. This is a hot pool that when we dug it in the shape of a puka, a little hole in the ground that was already there. And when we dug it, we hit 6 of approximately 200 active steam vents on the big island of Hawaii, and recognizing the magnificence of water and the power of that frequency coming out of volcanically heated rainwater the power, we decided to plumb those steam vents into the side of this hot pool. I'm telling you, there's nothing like it in the world. The top, there's a couple benches. I lie there I'm in therapy, my personal therapy. 45 minutes to an hour, completely submerged except for my face, which can look up at the magnificent stars on the Big Island. And or rain, when it rains on the rainy side of heaven. The rainwater hits my face, and it's like raindrop therapy, massaging my face. The rest of my body is body temperature because it is lava-heated steam that heats up this pool to body temperature. And the water frequency vibrations, because not only is it standing on this magnificent land that's literally 12 miles from right now where one of the most active volcanoes in the world is spewing, Mauna Loa, spewing the lava into Mauna Kea, spewing the lava into the ocean. So that the frequency vibrations of new life and the intense power of that energy is forthcoming. And the vibrations, because again, water is the receptive, creative matrix. It's coming into this water, which is rainwater from, scientifically proven, the most pure atmosphere in North America. So it's the purest rainwater in North America, perhaps the world. And it contains in it also the steam water. That just like Dr. Lorenzen in the creation of his clustered water, you send the water through a vortex. You spin it, and then you hit it with, he did his clustered water with a magnet of 50 million Gauss so that that frequency vibration would be ingrained into the tetrahedral structures of the water. So that then you could package it, put it in a plastic bottle, ship it across the United States, put it into a gallon of steam distilled water, and then wait 8 hours in a refrigerator, and suddenly the frequency vibrations of that concentrate move throughout the gallon solution, and now you've got a gallon of fresh, pure, structured or clustered water. Well, that's happening as that steam is coming through the ground. It's spinning, and the natural magnetism of the earth there, of the lava that's hardened, creates the frequency vibration of new life creation. So this whole center, this whole project is for the mission to create a venue for the science of creationism so that we can show a platform of what the truth really is concerning how all of the species are miraculously uplifted from the frequency vibrations of the Creator's love. So, your body being water, my body being mostly water. You lay in a pool of this level, this quality of water, and you begin, because that's a lot more water than what's in my body. And because of the entrainment, the power, the force of not only the water itself, the energy, but the mass volume of it, entrainment occurs. Your body starts to take on the vibrations of this miraculous place where on earth newest life is being created and uplifted. You come out a different person. It's a positive addiction, let me tell you. If a day or two goes by when I don't get my fix, my superhuman fix, I miss it royally. So water's electrocapacity is dynamically related to the nanotechnology and superconductors that are being developed today, the sciences of nanotechnology. Your DNA's bioelectric matrix is water. You're mostly water. Water is a superior superconductor. This is a picture, by the way, of my two little girls, Elena and Aria, swinging into the mouth of an extinct volcano. We're filled in with the water from this precious land. It's a place called Green Lake on the Big Island. But simple reason, therefore, given all of this, would predict that you would be able to best commune with our source, our Creator, in nature, with the divine energies, for relaxation and healing by playing or being in pure water. The cetacea, the dolphins and the whales have done something really right. If you want to be humble, if you think that we're so hot, we're the master species, just spend some time with the dolphins and you will be immediately corrected. Because these are the beings of the water. They can communicate up to 36 miles underwater because water is such a great jet energy transmitter. Their use of sonar echo, they can acoustically image. Imagine your ability. We have many medical intuitives who are blessed with that natural function, but their capacity to get that information is limited by the air medium versus the water medium. Imagine having the most extreme capacity to sonically echo, just like our magnetic resonance imaging devices in medical centers. These are the dolphins' capacities. They can sonar, echo, acoustically image, and diagnose what is going on in your body. They can form and play sonically with bubble rings that are incredible air bubbles underwater that they play with, they manipulate, they move, and they can heat up those bubbles to create steam measuring nearly 6,000 degrees through sound, or nearly the temperature of the sun at its surface. They have been known to heal the sick, including autistic children. They have incredible empathy. If you're near Black Sand Beach, about 8 miles from the Steam Vent Inn, many people go there to swim with the dolphins. Not in like the Hyatt Hotel on the other side, caged dolphins who have to put on performances. You pay $80 for an hour to get in the pool with them. This is in real life and nature. You don't pay anything. You may risk your life a little bit getting through the surf to get out to the water where they're swimming around and spinning around. But what they do is they only come to the people who are relaxed, in joy, and in love. People who have a dissonant energy, they don't come to. That's well known in our neighborhood. Now, this is a picture of what we call the Creator's Rainbow Spa. This is the steam bathhouse in Lanai, where we're developing the rainwater steam bar. So you'll be able to sit there and drink the steam water and the rainwater. And these are some of the hot pools that are there, but the door that you're looking at is the door to this most magnificent steam bathhouse room. And why do I mention this in the context of proteins? Because again, the steam being able to deliver to your body this incredible vibration, then recognizing that our whole bodies are simply protein spirals, both intracellular and extracellular. That it's not simply water that we were taught in medical or dental schools. It's not simply intracellular fluids. We have a gel, in fact, inside us and outside, between the cells, intracellular, that move the energy, move the frequency that's coming to us in the steam and in the water. Dr. Steve Halterwanger is a hero of mine. Many of you know him. He's the scientific director today for LifeWave Technologies, LLC, which is one of the most advanced and fastest growing multi-level companies with a patch technology. You might have heard of Dr. Steve Halterwanger. I didn't know him initially with regard to this technology. I knew him for his great contributions in the field of nutritional biochemistry. And he's a medical doctor who shared a lot of wonderful, important information. And because of him, the center portion of the book, DNA Pirates of the Sacred Spiral, I think is a masterpiece by primarily his work and his contributions. Now, he goes through in our new book the cell membranes and every aspect of what is like in our bodies electrical circuits. And if you really want to have a slam dunk on the fact that you're really not a human being, you're an electrical being, or a supercharged electrical, spiritually endowed creation. Read Halterwanger's contributions in DNA Pirates of the Sacred Spiral. He goes into the cell membrane and the spiraled fluid protein components are all analogous to conductors, semiconductors, resistors, transistors. He defines them all. Capacitors, inductors, coils, everything that's going on, every aspect of the cell. Now, how come we didn't learn this in medical school or basic physiology? Other examples of components that allow your cells to function as solid-state electronic devices include transducers, membrane receptors. Inductors are like membrane receptors in DNA. Capacitors are like cell and organelle membranes. Resonators are like membranes in DNA. Tuning circuits are like membrane protein complexes. And semiconductors are like liquid crystal protein polymers. The science in the field, particularly now of nanotechnology and protein crystallography and science, has slam dunked it. We are spiritual, blessed beings carrying electrical capacities and communications. Now here's the information on LifeWave. David Schmidt, this is a quote from Dr. Steve Halterwanger. David Schmidt, the inventor of the LifeWave patches, uses the electronic and magnetic features of the body, like a cellular radio, to transmit very weak bioelectric signals from his patches into the body. And it's the nanotechnology that allows them to encode in the amino acids within the water, within the patches, the frequencies. Then you put the patch on your body and you have then a transference of the energy and in fact a communication between in this particular case, the newest product is a fat-burning enzymatic reaction transmission frequency back and forth between the patch and the body. So Steve asked me, he says, you know, you should really get involved in this product because it's a great product. And I have, again, utmost respect for his work, and I know he wouldn't go after a fairy tale, and he's an American hero in my book for having exposed the pharmaceutical industrial, actually the chemical industrialists, as well as some of the pharmaceutical industrialists, but in his own hometown, he almost lost his life because he exposed the truth about chemical toxicity affecting children and causing cancer in his community. And he was politically ostracized from that community, and he was almost killed by the devil doers, and he continues to do his fine work. So he's a hero in my book. And I said, Steve, thanks for the invitation. I said, let me think about it. And so what I did is I thought about it for some time, and I said, well, how can I integrate the blessed work that we've been blessed to deliver with his work? And I came up with the concept of putting on these stickers of the sacred geometric form. Again, if you take the original musical scale, which I'm going to share with you again in a second, and the power of the sacred geometry of the 9-pointed star, which is the universe, represents the universal power, and you take Dr. Emoto's work in where he puts on the water, on the glasses, holding the water, love message, thanks message, and like Lorenzen, the 528 frequency code message, to impart those frequencies into the water. Then essentially what you have is what we call the 3M, the evolutionary energy enhancer. Evolutionary energy enhancer. To do what? To do whatever we can do to enhance and accelerate the already hastening, and you've experienced it, spiritual renaissance. The Creator creates through the spoken word, as Genesis said, as we've talked about, through water. I didn't realize that when we published the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse, and we started to put out the frequencies 396-417-528-639-741-852, and then Jonathan Goldman called me up, and he said, Len, he says, do you know the other three? And I said, yeah, just follow the same sequence. The Pythagorean mathematical frequency, which is consistent with Marco Rodin's toroidal and mathematics. The ancient mystery school Pythagorean math, the basis of Pythagorean mystery school math. I didn't realize any of this when we started this, but Goldman, Jonathan Goldman, who works as probably one of the planet's most esteemed and successful sound toning educators and healers through music and sound. And I shared with him this perfect circle of sound that I call it. And you connect the frequencies. These are hertz frequencies or cycles per second that the musicians can retune their instruments to play and experiment with. Why? Again, these are the Creator's musical scale, the original solfeggio, buried for 3,000 years in the Bible by my great ancestors, the ancient Levite priests, who translated the original Torah into the Greek Septuagint, and by doing so instilled the verse numbers into the Bible. There were no verse numbers in the Torah. And the codes came from there. So the ancient priests who knew how to levitate the huge stones for the building of the pyramids, and the Masonic knowledge that predated ancient Egypt, the ability to have this information, these frequencies, serve the function of creation, destruction, and miracles on behalf of the empowered people who had access to this knowledge. This was what we did. I knew we had revealed that. And I said when we revealed all these that we were leveling the playing field now. And that one concept was that this material wasn't right for humanity yet. That we're too immature yet to receive this information. That was one explanation that I shared. The other was that the ancient Levite priests were in bed with the global devil doers and served a satanic function. It's a possibility. But when Jonathan Goldman called me up and asked me for the other 3 tones, he said, "Len, you published 6. What are the other 3?" I said, "Well, it's easy for you to figure them out. Here, take a piece of paper, write a circle. Draw a circle on it. Put 3, 9, 6 in the 12th position at the top. Equally distant should be the other numbers. And then just connect, Jonathan, for the fun of it. The frequencies." I wonder if somebody could get me a glass of water, please. Water. Just for the fun of it, connect the frequencies. Thank you. You're a doll. Thanks a lot. Hi, nice to see you, sweetie. So 396, connect to a harmonic frequency of 639. Now notice this follows the perfect circle of sound sequence. The hundreds go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The tens go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The ones go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's like a ring, the perfect ring of sound. So connect now, just for the fun of it, the harmonic frequencies. 396, 639 over to 963. Do the same thing for 285, 528, 852. It's a mistake. See, we're all spiritually evolving. We're not perfect yet. And then you finally do it. You end up with what I just shared with you is the label, or the Klingon. We've got 2 varieties of those things. Shouldn't be mistaken for an alien Klingon. It's like sticks to via water. Basically, you stick that thing onto a glass with a thin layer of water, and again, the water is simply a conductor, the best conductor that we have. So, at any rate, the bottom line is that the sacred geometric form of the 9-pointed star, in our humble opinion, reflects the perfect circle of sound, the universal creative force of the Creator's math. So, Jonathan Goldman took this information, and in case you don't know, most of you probably have already heard, but he produced this magnificent CD called Holy Harmony. He had tuning forks honed to the specific electromagnetic frequencies of these sounds. And then he took a group of really highly professional vocalists into a recording studio, and what they do in the ancient Gregorian chant-like style is chant the Hebrew letters of the Messiah's name, Yod He Shin Vav He, which means, literally translated, the Messiah's name doesn't mean Jesus saves, as the Christian community is in gross deception about. It means, in fact, the Messiah said, "I've come in the name of my Father." Get it right, because the Bible, throughout the Bible, says, "Don't forget my name. Keep it holy." So the bottom line is that the Messiah's name means the Creator saves. Yah saves. Yod He Shin Vav He. So that's the message being articulated in a Gregorian chant according to the specific frequencies of the sound. And if you really want to have an extraordinary experience with prayer and meditation, deepening those experiences, this is my highest recommendation. Holy Harmony CD. It's awesome. Thank you, Jonathan Goldman. So the Bible says in the end that we need to sing a new song. We now have the tones, we have the music, and this is what I really didn't get until very recently. I really didn't get the blessing of the contribution that I was privileged to make, first by Dr. Joseph Paleo, who relayed the tones to me, and then by the angels that helped me to decipher the Illuminati's alphanumerics and their code to be able to fulfill Revelation 13:18, which says, quote, comes in the end times, massive people are dying, half of the world's population are about to be taken out, which is now. It says, quote, herein lies wisdom. Let those who understand count the number of the beast. For it is also the name of a man, and his number is 666. Read the book, DNA Parts of the... read the book, Death in the Air, Globalism, Terrorism, and Toxic Warfare, and you'll realize the name of the man perfectly suited is Henry Kissinger. That the word vaccination, by no accident in the alphanumerics of the Illuminati, is 666. The very next verse in the Bible is the light at the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of this darkness. It's about singing a new song. It's about 144,000 humble servants of the Creator coming together in the end times to sing a new song. 1 + 4 + 4 is 9. That's completion. That's like the fat lady sings in the spiritual domain. And I didn't realize this, but when we published these codes and we made them known, and the musicians around the world, Jonathan Goldman, Al Harris, Kunkel, Dan Kunkel, numerous other people started to spread this technology, this new wisdom, that the electromagnetics of the power of the Creator's tones, and we as humble servants, the co-creators, created in the image, empowered with the labiatum. The sixth note of the scale is La, Ut, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La. Labiatum, the lips, the creative instruments. We're singing and playing the Creator's frequencies, connecting us completely to the universal energies. I didn't realize the wonder and the empowerment of that. I believe that what this is it's a doorway, it's a key. It's a key to hasten what has already been hastened, the spiritual renaissance. And the power of that makes anything else pale by comparison. That I used to say years ago when I did the book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola, I used to tell people, you know, my grandfather died by choice after smoking for about 75 years. And the lesson from that was, he was as a very spiritually pious man, if you become like my grandfather, focused on service and love and giving thanks consistently to our great Creator, there won't be a Rockefeller, a Rothschild, or a Kissinger who will terminate you before your time. But what I didn't realize was that the blessing of the power was going out and uplifting us like, and this is my opinion, what the rapture really is. That we are being enraptured. We're being uplifted spiritually. That the book, interestingly enough, and I'm totally humbled, it is not me. I almost got left back in third grade. So that I'm telling you the truth. I've simply been a humble servant, and if I don't listen, just like you, if I don't listen to the direction that I'm getting, I get whacked. Okay? So there's nothing special about me. But when I read the book of Revelation 3:6. And it talks about the angel from Philadelphia and the spirit of the angel from Philadelphia opening a doorway, a portal that no man can close. I'm from Philadelphia. And this information has opened up, in my humble opinion, a portal that is the portal, the premier portal to the cosmic consciousness. That if we simply, with love and thanks, it's real easy, continue to put out these frequencies and these sounds, that the spiritual renaissance will literally solve all the earth's problems. I say that because of this metaphor. This is the difference between the power of our Creator and anything else, particularly evil. That you can go into a pitch black room full of evil, full of darkness, and light a little candle, and instantly that darkness flees. But you can't do the opposite. You can't go into a well-lit room full of truth and wisdom and righteousness and joy and health and harmony with the universal power. And you can't take any amount of darkness and go into that well-lit room and have any effect whatsoever. That is the metaphor which I frequently think of when I think that I'm not empowered. It is the greatest lesson for me, and I think for everybody else, to know that we're on the winning side and that we win in the end. This knowledge, this information can be used in various disciplines. The understanding of this information helps us to explain phenomena that are, hitherto not been explained by our limited knowledge. For example, I had this very interesting experience a few years back with a product here called C-Cure. The basic product is a bloodroot, a natural little plant you see here flowering. The essence of the Creator's sun vibrations enters that plant. The light color of the organism, the DNA, takes in that energy. It relays that frequency harmony to the essential oils within the plant. And from that blood root, the root of the plant, the product, which is a cancer cure, was tested by me. I had a basal cell carcinoma growing on my back for about 1.5 years. One day it started to bleed, and I said, I better do something. And I took this product, and to my wife's surprise and mine as well, we were in Florida 2 weeks later when this dime-sized tumor fell off my back. And because it wasn't surgically removed, and because the energy of nature, the aura of spirit, was consistent, contiguous across the skin, the hole, the big, was about 1/4 inch deep and a dime size round, filled in within 24 hours to most 48 hours. Astonishingly fast, just like the Silvalon bandages do the same thing because they allow the continuous frequency energy over your skin to be maintained. This gentleman, for example, is one of numerous subjects, people who took this particular product, and as you see, the cancers that he was sent home to die with on his face, within 6 months were completely gone. Halterwanger explains this best in his contributions to the book DNA Prior to the Sacred Spiral, because essentially what you're looking at is an energy interaction mechanism between those white blood cell bodyguards, the lymph cells, which are supposed to seek out and destroy that which is non-self, and nurture and support that which is of self. And it's all mediated through the positive and negative charges and the docking of the cells. And you get either like charges repel, opposite charges attract. Cancer cells develop a shrouding around them, a stealthing They can't be docked by your own human blood cells that would otherwise kill and destroy this invader. The electroenergy-dependent cell membranes, receptors, all of these things that Halterwanger talks about are brilliant. Please read this information. It intimately connects to many of the things that you've already learned, the golden mean, the spiraling of the DNA, the sacred geometry that have been advanced. Now we begin to see how in the field of medicine and biology, it's all interrelated. So in conclusion and summary, here's something for you to think about. This is my quote. One does not need to believe in reincarnation to explain why many people, many of you, feel that you have had ancient memories, lucid flashbacks to age-old events, or even divine callings. These experiences, theoretically associated with ancient ancestral memories, may be transmitted through hydroelectrified DNA. This hypothesis is supported by everything we've talked about, by the recent advances in electrogenetics, structured water science. Given the liquid crystal protein nanotechnology of humanity, measurable cell membrane frequency capacitance, bioenergetic transmissions and communication network within your being, and even the phantom DNA effect through subspace. These experiences are all likely facilitated by DNA clustered water nucleosome resonances. That is, for me, as a scientist, as a scientific investigator, a better explanation for some of these interesting past life reincarnation theologies. As waves now of the spiritual renaissance crash ashore to uplift humanity, behavior will be increasingly influenced. Those resonating in harmony with this revolutionary energy of enhanced planetary consciousness will be increasingly blessed and spiritually enlivened. Human dissidents or dissonance, opposing or neglecting this incredible force, will implode from the blocked energy to their hearts. Aliens, however, may be immune to this risk and survive this change in the energy matrix of our planet. It's about choosing to make a difference with this knowledge. Conscious choice-making consistent with good versus evil intentions will be made more often to most consistently by our world. This sociocultural trend and psycho-spiritual dynamic threatens, however, the status quo of alien controllers. Civil pathogens they are, or social terrorists, you can call them either, by the reason of their insanity and outmoded lust for power and control. It's very threatening. It is the essential, most threatening thing, and that's why the Department of Energy focuses on DNA and the electromagnetics of genetic expression, which is the electromagnetics of spirituality. Further implications to humanity. Given these metaphysical spiritual risks to alien antagonists' control, their survival depends on manipulating human deficiency needs as advanced by Maslow, including threats to basic physiological needs for food, water, and air. Again, look who is modifying our foods, mutating it, intoxicating it. Look at what they're doing to the water and the cost of the water. The basic physiological needs now are being controlled like never before. Look at what they're doing to our air. What about safety and shelter needs, our homes, the mass of multinational corporation plunder of our real estate? We don't own those things. We probably never have. Even if you've paid your mortgage off completely, read the fine print in the system of injustice. The deficiency needs of love and belonging, the British invasion, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the questioning the authority, the questioning of the traditions, the breakup of the American family, the Hillary Clinton et al. Children's rights agenda, so that now you don't vaccinate and you get your social services department come knocking at your door to take your children away. Where's the love? Where's the belonging of that? The self-esteem needs, You want your immune system to work. Then you have to empower it with the ultimate understanding of who you are, not as a human being, but as a superhuman being. How can your immune system tell the difference? Here's the metaphor. How can your immune system, which tells the difference between self and non-self, destroys that which is non-self, nurtures that what is self, how can it tell the difference between self and non-self and function if you don't know who you are as a holy child of the Creator? If you don't know your true worth, your true identity, your capacity, your glory, your intelligence, your worthiness of having all the greatest blessings that the universe can provide. If you don't know that and you don't grasp that 100%, how can you expect your miraculous, energetically functioning immune system to do its work? And that's why my grandfather lived. When they autopsied his body, as I told you in the DNA, in the Emerging Viruses video, they couldn't understand how my grandfather lived for the last 20 years. Every bone, muscle, and organ throughout his body was riddled with cancer. What kept him going was the desire for spiritual service and the link to the Creator. So that's the self-esteem that we're talking about. You look at all the pathology in society, the drug abuse, the dysfunctional families. It all stems from the same thing, not recognizing in each other our brotherhood and our sisterhood, our divinity, our co-creatorship. Further implications, the current socio-political and economic trends, particularly evident in the United States under the Bush administration, strongly evidences evil manipulations and thus provides ample support for the pathognomonic diagnosis of an alien threat, an alien conspiracy against humanity, and psycho-spiritual warfare. The theory that the power of evil pales by comparison with that of good is increasingly supported by these revelations. Obviously, there is an organizing source that determined the laws for the energetic movement and evolution of life and the macrocosm. Grasping this great truth, the truth about our DNA and divinity, the electrogenetics and the universal consciousness, following simple mathematically governed divine laws as they do, then once you have this, you graduate. You graduate from the school of hard knocks. You get it right. It's the same as getting off the karmic wheel of death and rebirth. It assures humanity by choice spiritual evolution to become fully human and certainly not inhuman or alien. So the core problem, this great likelihood of humanity's mass spiritual transformation represents the greatest risk or liability to the aliens, extraterrestrials, or simply dysfunctional, spiritually handicapped humanoids. The European oligarchy that historically engaged this world in wars, genocides, and disasters now controls the genetics industry. Hardware and software for electrogenetic devolution has been activated from space and communications networks by global operatives under several guises, including social progress, public health, homeland security, and the Strategic Defense Initiative. The only solution that we have is choosing to sing a new song. You hold the choice over living a lethal lie, resulting in a shallow and enslaved existence, or celebrating the greater truth about the sacredness of your spirit, your genetics, your divine connection, and your ability to uniquely contribute to humanity at this critical time. It is time for a new song. Increasingly, you will see families with these shared interests and values and resources and knowledge. They will develop, as we are doing in Hawaii and many of you are doing in your places, your wonderful locations, to develop spiritually your survival communities. And many will thrive as models for sociocultural normalization and superhuman spiritual evolution. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Len. Fact-filled, inspiring, hopeful. Let's take a quick break. We're going to be back at 4 o'clock sharp for the next presentation. Len will meet with you at the author table in the main room. Thanks so much.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Privilege, pleasure, blessing to be here. Thank you. How are you doing? Great, excellent. We're going to talk a little bit about the great global genetic conspiracy. What I'm not going to be able to share with you in this second part is what I shared in the first. The bottom line is that the science is in. The book DNA Pirates of the Sacred Spiral does a slam dunk using the most advanced science in the field of genetics, electrogenetics, nanotechnology, protein science. The fact is that you've been lied to, obviously. You don't have fluid in your body. What you have, you've got water, but it's combined with a whole assortment of variety of electromechanical, electrochemical apparatus that essentially makes your protein crystal lattices a facilitating channel for electromagnetic and bioacoustic expression. In a nutshell, you are a holy child of the Creator. You are a spiritual being, an electromagnetic bioacoustic creation long before you are a physical manifestation. In essence, your physical manifestation, this reality that we call earth, hardness, physical matter, such as an organism, such as yourself, that you are a precipitation of a holy symphony, virtually the master composer, supreme conductor of the universal orchestra, is singing love songs to every species simultaneously. Now, if you and I think of ourselves as powerful co-creators, and indeed we are, we're holy children of the Creator, yet if you simply recognize that of all the things that you've created in your life, how humbling it is to recognize that all at once, simultaneously, your DNA, having been created by this master composer, master conductor, is literally, like every other species that has its own unique DNA sequence, acting as it does as an antenna to the reception and the transmission of the electromagnetic frequencies and bioacoustics of the love song harmonies from the heavenly throne, which literally precipitates you in this physical space, which is largely a facade, basically, when you think about the quantum sciences and the whole understanding of, quantum physics. That ultimately, it's incredible that there is a master intelligence that is an incredible musician that is literally vibing you and harmonizing you and uplifting your every single atom and molecule through a genetic sacred spiral to literally precipitate your essence. You are, in essence, a bioholographic projection of a divine harmony that we can't perceive simply because we don't have the ears that can hear those frequencies. But yet, you are, I am, we are together, holy children of the Creator. That's essentially what I presented in 3 hours, based on all the science, going through it one step at a time, understanding how DNA works to interact with the intracellular protein matrix. All of the enzymes are regulated electrically. The fact is that the hoax of pharmaceuticals and the hoax of Dow chemicals, the fact is that in your body, chemical reactions virtually are insignificant compared to water and electromagnetic reactions. DNA, it operates simply because it's surrounded by what's sacred geometric forms of water, virtually the Merkaba in water molecules. You've heard of pyramid power. Well, the water molecules are just like the Creator's name in the Bible. It says the Yod He Vav He. That's the tetragrammaton or the tetrahedron molecule. That's a six-sided hexagonal shape, a four-sided equilateral triangular structure, but when it goes into its three-dimensional space with a water molecule next to it, it forms the Star of David or the Merkaba structure. So it's all water molecules, sacred geometric forms, and as I shared in my last presentation, introduction, using the book of Genesis as an introduction, how did the Creator create? It says Genesis is through working on the face of the waters. And the sacred chemistry of water allows it to facilitate best electromagnetic frequencies of sound and of electromagnetic fields. And that is what causes all the chemicals and reactants in your body to operate. DNA receives and transmits signals because of that. All the enzymes that are responsible for all the metabolic reactions in your body have about 10 layers of water over every single chemical or every single enzyme, every single protein. It's all surrounded by sacred geometric forms of water. So that's the bottom line, really quick summary of part one. It's a slam dunk on the understanding that we are spiritual beings. First, you've been lied to, I've been lied to, we've all been lied to. Why? Because if you knew how powerful you are as a holy child of the Creator, a co-creator that can literally vibe. People ask me all the time, how come you're not afraid that you're going to kill you? That's a ridiculous question. By the way, the quality of the questions that you're asking yourself at every given moment determines the quality of the outcomes in your life. So if you ask me, how come you're not afraid? It comes from a fear-based center. And the truth of the matter is, so long as you're operating in the cocoon, the womb of the Holy Spirit of divine protection, where, again, we go into this in the beginning session of this program and in the beginning of the book, DNA Pirates of the Sacred Spiral, the incredible concept as advanced in the book of Genesis that heaven is right here, right now. When the Messiah, Yeshua, whose name means Yah saves, the Creator saves, said that we are literally living in a kingdom of heaven, or that the kingdom of heaven is near. He didn't mean temporarily far off in time. Heaven is right here, right now, in the electromagnetic bioacoustic matrix of the Holy Spiritual Divine, flowing anointing that we choose to leave when we go into our heads in fear and fear-based concepts. That's why the media operates based on fear. It's playing to your survival ego mechanism. And so it's a choice to come out of that. And it's a choice to constantly be in that womb, that cocoon of protection and universal prevention, so that you can literally march through the valley of the shadow of death in these end times, fearing no evil. Like Psalm 91 says, 10,000 people can be dying at your left, and indeed they will, and 1,000 dying at your right. But those of us who have the understanding, and clearly we all have the opportunity to have the anointing, will be the frontline warriors in this end times crusade, whereby, in fact, the conclusion of this program is that we won't need anything except for that divine anointing to lay hands on people and to pray and to have miraculous healings take effect. Because the sound frequency vibration of that love essence will be pouring through those of you who have literally cleaned yourselves, become the holy channels, the clear channels for that divine love. And so that's my prophecy. It's other people's prophecy. That the Messiah said, you will do more than what I have done. You know, we're all agreed this is the end times. You look in the standard religious legions of Rhea, the virtually paganized religions of Christianity and Judaism and Muslim. Ultimately, they're all under deception. They're all in apostasy. The bottom line is that we are all capable of manifesting the divine truth. You know, I get challenged all the time. Let me just, hate to go off on this tangent, but it's kind of important because a lot of people are stuck in this nonsense. You know, pseudo-religion, following a pagan concept. The legions of Rhea is the source of the word religion. Rhea. Legions of Rhea. And I hope that wasn't my mic. I get challenged all the time by those who call themselves Christians who are not. In the days of the Messiah, it was a largely Jewish culture he was dealing with. Today, we're America based on Christian fundamentals. So today, it's beware of those who call themselves Christians who are not. And the concept and the truth is that all of the religions have their own exclusivity doctrines. That's dogma. The Messiah said it is by the traditions of men that make the word, the truth, to no avail. So we all have the capacity to connect. And if there's only one creator, and if there's only one truth, major truth with a capital T, and there's only, therefore, let's say one Messiah that has come, then you see that there's no difference between them, which means that salvation is possible for virtually everyone, not simply those who call themselves Christians. Anyway, it's an interesting concept. Let me, it's especially interesting coming from a Jew who turned Christian. Quick, again, summary. In emerging viruses, AIDS and Ebola, I have one bestseller, that's it. I have 14, I'm just finishing my 14th book, DNA Pirates of the Sacred Spiral. This was the one, by the grace of the Creator and support from folks like yourselves, you made it a bestseller. Got me out, my family out of a lot of hot water. We went out a long time for that one. It was 3 years, $330,000, and I basically sold everything, including my children's college fund, to do it. But what made this book a bestseller was the United States government contract. You're looking at it, under which numerous AIDS-like and Ebola-like viruses were bioengineered by the Army's 6th top biological weapons contracting lab called Lytton Bionetics. At the time that I discovered these documents, it was the end of this investigation. It was a powerful find, but it wasn't the big picture. It was a very important part, if you wish to survive in these end times, part of the picture. That is the understanding that there are political and financial forces at work that kill people, that are doing that for population reduction, population control. In fact, it was Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, who virtually ordered the development of these types of viruses. This is the contract that evolved out of Kissinger's 1969 National Security Advisor post, where he was looking for alternative ways of not only conducting biological warfare through synthetic biological agents produced in laboratories, but also as par with President at the time, actually later, about to become CIA director at the time. At the 1969, he was U.S. Congressman from Texas, George H.W. Bush, stood up before Congress and declared an urgency for the United States of America, saying that we have burgeoning populations in the third world and it represents a national security threat. We need to get rid of a lot of black people. And so Kissinger at that time virtually ordered the development of these. Anyway, the story in Emerging Viruses is reality, and it has the hard, cold, hard-hitting documents, and that's basically what has kept us financially going, is folks like yourselves have the eyes to see the truth and the documentation that we presented and the ears to hear this type of reality. In 1999, Dr. Joseph Palaio, actually 98, presented me with a project that I didn't want to take on initially, and because it was the Creator's project, I was required to take it on, and ultimately it was the most really wonderful and very easy book to produce. I had angels stationed because I told the Creator, I haven't got time to do this book. If you want me to do this book, you better help me out. And so literally I had a couple angels stationed beside me. My wife can attest to the fact that I simply sat in front of a computer for like 6 months, 5.5 months, and the book was done. And I didn't write it. I was observing it being written. There was one section of the book called The Mind Blower where you're in my head at the time that I'm watching all this take place, including the expose of, I think, some of the most profound revelations in the last few centuries. One of the things that came out of this that was a mind blower was the original musical scale, the Creator's musical scale, before it was distorted, before it was manipulated to dumb down humanity. If we are, as I said earlier, bioelectric, bioacoustic, spiritual manifestations, precipitations of love harmonies played from a heavenly orchestra, then music is profoundly important in every sense. Salvation depends on it, physical and spiritual. And so the recognition and the revelation, the uncovering, the re-revealing of the original musical scale that had been buried in the book of Numbers in a code. Chapter 7, verses 12 through 83 has the original code that was put in there by my great ancestors, the Levi priests, 3,000 years ago when they originally translated the Torah into the Greek Septuagint and instilled the verse numbers into the Bible, and therein placed the original notes that probably, because these notes are associated with miracles, all of all kinds. Creation, destruction, and miracles. That they secreted those by putting them into a code in the Bible. And because they're my great ancestors, you've probably, if you've followed my work, heard me share that I'm probably either repenting for the sins of my great ancestors. There's a whole school of thought that says that those guys were already on the way out in terms of being, holders of the sacred knowledge, the Pythagorean mystery school mathematics, long before the Templars took over the Holy Land, that the miracle frequencies that these impart were much like the technologies that the great pyramids were used to levitate those great stones and place them through sonic vibration into the proper position. And my good old boys, my family, my great ancestors, the Levites, look at the Bible. It tells you that they were the keepers of their wisdom, that was their calling. And so I may be repenting for the fact that my great ancestors initially buried this information and that it's been now part of my calling to re-reveal this to the planet. Or there's another school of thought that says, just like parents, you don't introduce to your children concepts that are a little bit premature for them or more mature than they're capable of integrating at any particular time in their lives. So now humanity has evolved, and maybe it's now perfectly timed that my great ancestors, including Moses, knew in advance they had to bury it because humanity wasn't ready for it yet. Maybe. So it's an academic question, but the bottom line is that the information, the original 6 tones, and then we now know, and I was able to decipher the other 9. It allowed for Jonathan Goldman, who is one of the nation's leading experts in healing and music, called me up. He said, Len, I know you published 6 of the ancient codes, the musical notes from the ancient solfeggio scale. He says, aren't there 9? I said, yeah. I said, I can share with you how to find the others. And I did that. It was a simple mathematical thing. It's not hard at all to see how it happened. And so he took those notes. He went into a sound recording studio with 9 of the tuning forks that he had specifically honed to those specific frequencies with vocalists who do the Gregorian chants. And they came out with a magnificent CD called Holy Harmony that I believe is probably, if not the most powerful healing, meditation, prayer-enhancing CD in the planet. It's certainly among the top 2 or 3. It's very powerful. These frequencies are extremely powerful. And the revelations associated with the numbers, like in the book of Numbers, impart revelations. These numbers allowed us to understand that English language, what I'm speaking to you now, is based on the Pythagorean mystery school mathematics and the sacred languages of Hebrew, Sanskrit, and ancient Aramaic. They were the sacred languages. They imparted a frequency that manifested in physical reality, in cymatics, the science that studies the effects of sound on matter and the flow of matter into forms and shapes, such as the miracle of your body, all sung into shape. That's the science of cymatics that studies the fact that all of your proteins and throughout your body and your DNA and your hemoglobin, it's all spiraled. Why? Like a Tesla coil to enhance the energy, the frequency, the absorption and transmission of sacred creator's love vibrations. Music and language. If the Creator created through the spoken word and He creates you and I as His holy children, don't you think if you send your child to school, you want to empower that child with everything possible so that they can be wonderful co-creators and come home and bless you, right? With wonderful works, and you take pride and joy in the works that they come home with? And so we were sent to this school called Planet Earth with two lips. Creator creates through the spoken word and song. So do we. English language, we show you in the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. Based on the ancient mystery school mathematics, the Pythagorean secreted mathematics, English is speaking Hebrew alphanumerically but backwards. They flipped it. Who flipped it? Same people we're going to talk a little bit about. The Anglo-Saxons in the 1400s, the royal families, using the model of Babylon, the Babylonian temple, where the Creator decided to divide the sheeple to conquer the flock. He says, I don't like you guys anymore. You're not giving me praise and joy. You're basically egomaniacs who say that you can build castles to the sky. Well, I will confuse your tongues. I will change your languages. And then they could no longer commune with each other and the Holy Spirit of divine power that comes through the true languages, the sacred languages. And so that was one revelation. Another revelation was the fact that each of the 6 original musical scale tones spoke of, prophesied, the gathering, we call it the beginning times gathering of the 144,000 humble servants of the Creator, prophesied to assemble in the end times to do what? To sing a new song, to sing the Creator's praises in such a way as to instantaneously and miraculously deliver the entire planet back to the Creator. And those who are in dissonance, that is in their hearts, they are not vibrating to a similar love frequency vibrations. They will literally implode from their own dissonance. And so that takes a lot of pressure off of those of us who think we have to save the world. Okay? It's all handled. The Creator's handled it. We just need to handle the stuff in our own lives. That's the challenge. So, next revelation that we came out with in Healing Codes was the fact that those 6 notes specifically talked about exactly what I just said, the miraculous gathering of the 144,000, the singing of the new song, and we now have the tones, we have the music. We basically are now looking for the musicians and the venue. So if you know any concert organizers who would love to join us in this, I think, historically, vitally important, if not urgent, concert, just think of it as an affirmation. If nothing else results from it, it would be wonderful. Next revelation is the fact that the darkest before the dawn in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, comes in verse 13, 18 of the book of Revelation. And it talked about, at the end times, when the great plagues have struck, people are dying left and right. The world's wealthiest have been deceived by the same movers and shakers who actually says practice sorcery. The root word of sorcery is pharmacopoeia, pharmaceuticals. These are the military, medical, petrochemical, pharmaceutical industrialists. Okay? And so it says in the Bible, Revelation 13:18, that how you will know these people at this particular time in history, and why this is the darkest before the dawn, because the dawn, the light at the end of the tunnel, comes in the very next verse, which is 14:1. 13:18 says this, "Herein lies wisdom." This is a quote. Think about this. Creator could say, the Bible could say a lot of things at that moment in time. Here's the prescription. Quote, "Herein lies wisdom. Let those who understand," that is, have the intelligence, both in the head and documentation intelligence, "let those who understand count the number of the beast. For it is also the name of a man." Some Bibles say name of a person. And his number is, of course it couldn't be a woman. Not in a man-run insane world. Okay? It's also the name of a person, and his number is 666. Now, if you read that verse and you just simply think, what's logical? Names are done in letters. Counting is done in numbers. To count a name, you need an alphanumeric code. And that's the code that we came out with in Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. It just happened to be also the Illuminati's principal code. It happened to be the British Secret Service's principal codes. Of course, MI6 runs CIA. And all of America is simply a puppet operating by the pulling of strings from Germany and London, largely, not entirely. The great German banksters, we'll talk a little bit about in this presentation quickly. Rockefeller is nouveau riche. Even though he controls medicine, pharmaceuticals, sciences in the United States, pretty much all around the world, they're nouveau riche. They got their money from J.P. Morgan, who got it from the Rothschilds. So the old European money, the royalties, banksters, we're going to talk a little bit about in this presentation that's going to bring you up to date on what they've been doing insofar as DNA manipulation and the Human Genome Project heist and this whole concept of them having pirated the sacred spiral to manipulate humanity in this end times warfare that I prefer to call bio-spiritual warfare, wherein DNA is the central processing station and the central focus of the warfare effort for optimal population control. And that includes depopulation in these end times. So Revelation 13:18, we nailed it. 666 happens to be Kissinger. I'll show you that in a couple minutes. Next thing, Revelation 14:1 was exactly 144,000 gathering. Why? Because 9 is completion. In the Pythagorean Mystery School math, it's completion. It's when the fat lady sings. It's over. 1 plus 4 is 9. When we start to sing, it's over. We win. That's all there is. We win. So that's essentially what we did with Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse in a real brief nutshell. I took it to the next step in exposing the Illuminati and the particularly MI6, because the third musical note of that ancient musical scale was Miragistorum. Like, you know, do, re, mi. It was ut, re, mi, and the third note, mi, Miragistorum in Latin, or miracles in English. If you go to Haydn's 96th Symphony, 9 plus 6 is 15. 1 plus 5, you always reduce it to the single-digit integer in Pythagorean math. It's only 9 numbers in the universe. 10 is actually 1 plus 0, that's 1. 11 is 1 plus 1, that's 2. Okay, so 15 is 6. Okay, so now you had Miracle 6, MI6, and it happened to be the 528 frequency. The frequency of the ancient musical scale, mi note, is 528. Number one, it happens to be the magical repair frequency for damaged DNA. Says who? The world's leading genetic biochemists. It also happens to be this middle C tuning fork frequency used by the world's leading military weapons technicians. And Miracle 6, you know, when you think about cleaning up damaged DNA or the eugenics movement, the royal bloodlines, the purity of the bloodlines, getting rid of the dysgenics. That's what the whole eugenics movement, that's what this origin of today's human genome and genomes for life and genetics programs are all about. It's simply a continuation. And I went into that in great depth in part 1 of this presentation. But ultimately, that this is the Miracle 6 origin of how it was that MI6, the principal Gestapo, intelligence gathering arm of the royal family of England and banksters of Germany and Europe, their principal intelligence gathering organization was specifically titled MI6 because it's paying tribute to the fact that that's their principal game plan to clean up and manipulate, control, enslave, and kill at will those dysgenic or people considered less pure. Now that begins to explain why it is that blacks are so heavily targeted. They have a concept, the WASPs do, that these are inferior bloodlines. I think that they're living under a great deception called fear, false evidence appearing real. Well, at any rate, also we fulfilled the Revelation. Let me just go back. Revelation 13, 18. When you count the number of the beast, suddenly you have this mathematics and you have this code. Now you can go around all over the world and see the beast's tentacles reaching all over into the corporations, the multinational corporations that are the major players, the organelle of the beast. Like Exxon, that double X. It's a 666. XXX, adult entertainment, and so on. 666. In Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse, because so many people were asking me, what do we do, Horowitz? Okay, you've been coming out with all this stuff about the Illuminati. You know, how can we use this knowledge to prepare our own bodies? So I came out with healing celebrations, miraculous recoveries through ancient scripture, natural medicine, and modern science, where we demystify miraculous healings. How is it that miraculous healings can be made to come about? And what are the 5 important steps for every single one of us to be taking right now to prepare our vessel to be the clear channels of this love vibration so that we can be the frontline warriors for healing, not the medical deities in this cult called pharmaceutical-based medicine. Number 1, detoxification. Number 2, deacidification. Number 3, boosting natural immunity holistically. That includes physical, mental, emotional, social, environmental, and above all, spiritual choices and changes that we have to make, and sometimes on a moment-to-moment basis, certainly a daily basis, to purify our temples, to uplift our spirit, to be all that we can be. Step 4 is oxygenation, heavily suppressed. And step 5 is the bioelectric technologies. Think about it. If you are spiritual beings, what is the spirit? It's electromagnetic and bioacoustic manifestation. That's what it is. The holy harmonies, the divine frequencies manifesting in your precipitation of physical reality. Okay, if you're an electromagnetic bioacoustic manifestation, how do you treat that? With drugs? With chemicals? Or do you treat that with energy? Energy. Of course, you wouldn't understand that and know that if you went through the medical hazing process. So everything is sacred geometry, manifests from sound and frequency, color, light therapies. Bioacoustics involve sound and color and light and frequencies, from Rife Technologies to the Quantum QXCI, the new, latest, most advanced machine. But ultimately, again, you won't need the machines. You just stay tuned to your own purification healing process and your own spiritual upliftment. Your anointing will become so powerful that all you will have to do is think and pray with a loving intent coming from your heart, and you will be blessing people with the divine Creator's own power. And that will heal. And then you'll walk like the Messiah, fulfill what the Messiah says. You will do more than what I have done, he said. If not now, when, Christians? And that ultimately you will say the same thing that what he told people when he created all those miracles and healed all those people. He said, "It is not of me. It is by your faith and trust that you are healed." Faith and trust in what? In a divine creator who blesses all of us. So ultimately, we do a slam dunk. In the new book, we do a slam dunk, definitive expose on who you are as a spiritual versus physical being. Using the most advanced science in the field of genetics, electrogenetics, the nanotechnology, protein science, protein crystallization, the whole concept of the way that the cell membranes work, the ways that cancers, we demystify how come it is that cancers evade the immune system. It's all done electromagnetically and electromechanically. T cells can't dock on those cell membranes of tumor cells because the charges are not right. You begin to change the charges, change the pH of the body, like I was telling you in step 2 of the Healing Celebrations protocol. Suddenly miracles, you're a miracle being. You know, you've just been dumbed down. Most of us have been dumbed down to no longer be able to appreciate. We think like we watch television, we got to take pop magic pills to cure every ill. And now life in the cultural indoctrination, the cult that they are forming now on the prime time tells us that we're going to be popping pills for every disease, which is going to give us a normal life of having other diseases. That's not normal to me. That's propaganda. That's lunacy in Babylon. So who doesn't want you to know that you are a spiritual being is what we're going to be talking about in this presentation today. What they're doing, what they're planning, and the Sacred Spiral's purpose within all of this. And Brian Hall, who is the organizer, again, give Brian a hand. He asked me to focus on the conspiracy aspect since this is Conspiracy Con. So we're going to go into this. I'm not going to go into this aspect. As a matter of fact, I'm going to quickly fly through these. These are the slides. You got to forgive me. All right, here we are. Okay. Okay, so you've heard this story before. This is relating to the Templars. This was relating to what was stolen along with the ancient arcana, the sacred knowledge, the wisdom from Solomon's temple, my great ancestor's temple in the Holy Land. Okay? Around 800 BC, the fall of the Holy Land, and ultimately later on you had the Templars go in there and dig up the treasures. Now, how does this relate? We're going to talk about the DNA, and we're going to talk about some of the conspiracy aspects of this X symbol. See the X in the skull and bones, links to genetics. We can talk about this in the book. Let me finish this. 666 is not just simply Kissinger, Kissinger. Using that alphanumeric code as Kissinger. It's also New York. Interesting. Computer, Santa Claus. Visa is VI, and SA is 666. VI is 6, and SA is 66. The barcodes, all the barcodes are sectioned by sixes. 666, 3 of them. The Nazi Gestapo lightning strikes, SS, is 66. So is Her Majesty's SS. James Bond, of course, Ian Fleming, we showed you in the book Death in the Air, has been a British Secret Service propagandist from the beginning of his career. So that the entire James Bond genre of films and novels is essentially taking reality and throwing a twist on it just enough so that when foolish conspiracy theorists get together, we're said to have watched too many Hollywood films, you know, scoffed at. At any rate, MI6, there it again is MI is 16. 1 plus 5 is 6. Now, this on the left-hand side of the screen is from the principal propaganda mill for the entire genetics industry. It's called the Dolan DNA Learning Center. And it's sponsored largely by Rockefeller University and Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories, the initial home for the eugenics racial hygiene movement. And this is from the 2002 annual report. Interestingly enough, you've got a skull and you've got a bones. And here you've got the X, which is a 6, and you've got the skull and bones. So is there a relationship between the skull and bones depicted here, or what's called the Jolly Roger, and the Skull and Bones fraternity, and even the Union Jack on the British flag with the global genetic controllers? And to answer that question, let me go back and give you some of the Holy Blood, Holy Grail information that overlaps this investigation that I've conducted. Jacques de Molay, you might remember, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar in the late 12th century, is seen here wearing his red cross. The original Jolly Roger. This is the source, the origin of the Jolly Roger or the Red Cross. Red Cross symbol also associated with American Red Cross, Rockefeller. Of course, you had your German Nazis at the end of World War II given American Red Cross identifications to get them through Project Paperclip out of Nazi Germany. Rockefellers and the Dulles brothers were on top and in charge of all of that. Today you have, through not only vaccinations, the great plagues being spread, but all through the contaminated blood supplies that, thanks again to the Rockefeller-controlled blood banksters, the international blood banksters, I call them, are doling out hepatitis viruses in the contaminated blood, prion diseases, virtually you name it, they've spread it through the blood, HIV/AIDS included. So the original Red Cross symbol, or Jolly Roger, Jolly Roger, the symbol was first used by a French order of militant monks known as the Poor Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, later known as the Knights Templar. The Templars were originally pious men. They were also ferocious warriors, pitching themselves into the midst of their enemies astride charging war horses. They were fully anointed because they were privy to the sacred, secreted knowledges. They were spiritually purified themselves and uplifted themselves. I have no doubt they were probably good guys doing good things at that time. Against incredible odds, they fought like men possessed, either prevailing in their cause or suffering death under the banner of Golgotha, the place of the skull where their Christ died, symbolized by the Red Cross. They were initially dedicated to the protection of travelers and pilgrims of all religions, though they themselves were Christians. They were great statesmen. Here's the history of American politics today and global politics. Politically adept economic traders. They were allied with the great sailor. That's the Navy fraternity that had created a worldwide trading empire in Phoenician times. They became immensely powerful because of this, had the largest fleet and the most successful banking system of Europe. That is where we have the origins of today's powerful banksters. They were eventually driven from the Holy Land by Saladin. They're Muslim adversaries. Now you begin to understand the long history of Muslim versus Christian warfare, or Judeo-Christian versus Muslim warfare. They continue to fight for their cause in the high seas and elsewhere. Today, the United States Navy, in several of my books already, from emerging viruses on to this new one, DNA, shows that the Navy, United States Navy, is central to America's worst devil doing on every level, whether it's biological weaponry, whether it's nuclear tests, whether it's energy, electromagnetic frequency, types of experimentation for population control. You always see the most highest levels of the Navy and the Navy officials being involved. The Templars retreated then to their Mediterranean island bases on Cyprus, Rhodes, and Sicily, and then together with the Order of St. John, later named the Knights of Malta, which again we showed you in the book Emerging Viruses, there were numerous of Nazis, highest level SS Gestapo, some of Hitler's worst, or he considered them his finest, Knights of Malta members. They remained the foremost maritime powers in the Mediterranean, continuing to effectively wage war on Muslim shipping while conducting world trade. The Templars were very powerful then when jealousy and covetousness reigned in the early 14th century. Philip IV, who was deeply in debt to the order, had seen their treasures stored in Paris. So the guy's in debt to them, sees how wealthy they are, decides to declare war on them along with Pope Clement V. And they began to ruthlessly suppress the order, especially they began to attack on Friday, October the 13th, the reason for which Friday the 13th has become known as an unlucky day. Arrests, torture, false accusations, executions followed. Now, a large number of the Templars escaped that day to an uncertain future where the outcome of which is being manifested socioeconomically, politically today. They found refuge abroad. Indeed, they did. On the eve of the arrest, the entire Templar fleet with all the glorious treasure vanished from the port of La Rochelle, carrying with it a vast fortune. Now, all this fortune was wanted, and the Templars were wanted by the Pope and all the crowns of Europe. And from that time on, the Templars became viewed as pirates. Pirates. The Templars finally found sanctuary in Scotland, where Templar graves bear witness to them having lived and died there in the 14th century. King Robert the Bruce had no interest in persecuting the order. In fact, to the contrary, he took advantage of their fugitive status, offering them asylum in return for their help in his war for independence against King Edward II of England. There is evidence that the Templar fleet had traveled here to North America in 1398 with the Sinclairs, almost 100 years before Columbus, whose boat also heralded the same red cross on its sail. Some settled there. The Sinclairs, or St. Clair's Castle near Edinburgh, was situated next to Rosslyn Chapel, which was constructed by the Sinclairs according to the floor plan, which is in the Bible, of Solomon's original temple. Now, throughout Scotland, as well as within Rosslyn Chapel, there are carvings and tombstones dating back to the 15th, 16th, and 17th century, using combinations of the Templar imagery, skull and crossbones, Masonic symbols, compass and square. Additional members of the Stuart royal house became one of Freemasonry's biggest supporters during their reign in Scotland and England. Many rituals used in modern Freemasonry have their origins in ancient texts discovered by the Templars in the ruins of Solomon's Temple, including Pythagorean, mystery school math, and the metaphysical documents that we have now, by divine revelations, have been putting out. Much of this relates to suppressed knowledge concerning sacred geometry, impacting various aspects of science, from water structuring and clustered water to the numerical frequencies of the color spectrum that are associated with creationistic theories and genetic expression. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the skull and crossbones became a symbol with a powerful reputation that began to be identified with other organizations. The Templars had long since gone underground. They evolved into organizations such as the KKK, also 666, Ku Klux Klan, whose imagery you see here. Here's an interesting disguise for the ancient symbol skull and bones. Historians agree the American Civil War was largely financed and largely instigated by Europe's banking elite. America's bloodiest war, sponsored by the British royalty and the banksters of Europe. Banks controlled by Rothschild family financed both sides of the Civil War. One of Rothschild's agents was George Bickley, founder of the Freemasonry-linked Knights of the Golden Circle. Bickley extolled the advantages of succession from the Union by the Confederate States, and the politics and the political wheel began for the Civil War. On the other side, the Rothschild, J.P. Morgan, August Belmont banks financed the Union. In addition, Rothschild's London Bank supported the North, while its Paris branch bank funded the South. Lincoln got wind of it. I talk about that. I cut it from this presentation because I don't have enough time, but Lincoln was assassinated because he basically wanted to print greenbacks. He understood the scam. Curiously reflecting on the Templars and pirates' domination at sea, the Southern Cross, the Confederate State Cross, is adopted by the Confederate States, was their Navy's emblem, with certain parallels to the crossbones. With crossbones symbolized behind, The central red cross in Britain's Union Jack reflects the original red cross adopted by the Knights Templar. Now watch this. You take the British flag, you cut it into quarters, rotate the quarters 90 degrees, and you have the Nazi swastika. The disappearance, the mysterious disappearance of the great Templar banking dynasty fuels speculation that the Skull and Bones fraternity linked Rothschild family remains greatly empowered today, having financed Rockefeller banks that financed Hitler's rise to power and industrially supported both America and the Third Reich during World War II. Let me just tell you that a year and a half ago, you might recall in various news networks, there was an independent film producer who snuck his way into Yale's Skull and Bones fraternity and filmed a pledging session. Sacred ceremonies for pledging that fraternity. And he filmed them conducting mock murders and kissing skulls. That is part and parcel, I can tell you as a Harvard-trained behavioral scientist, that is part and parcel for desensitization and training for genocide, for conducting genocide by some of the world's most powerful leaders, which have many of them both pledged and gone through Skull and Bones fraternity. The Rockefeller global empire, I don't need to spend a lot of time with. If you've been enrolled in these circles long enough, you know the various industries that the Rockefellers have substantial control, if not virtually entire controlling power over. And that, again, just recall that the banksters of Europe gave Rockefellers their start. The Human Genome Project heist begins in Chapter 10 of the book, DNA Pirates of the Sacred Spiral. The chapter begins with this quote by Brzezinski, who was David Rockefeller's protege. If you remember, Kissinger was Nelson Rockefeller's protege, and that Brzezinski followed Kissinger as National Security Advisor, again overseeing CIA, FBI, and foreign policy. But he wrote a book called The Technotronic Era, Brzezinski did, in which he's quoted, "Power will gravitate into the hands of those who control information." Of course, information, electromagnetic frequencies are information-based. Language is based on sound frequencies. The Creator creates through the spoken word. What is word but sound? What is sound but electromagnetic frequencies? What's that? Simply mathematics and physics. It's information. It's data. Data processing. That's how genetics works. This will encourage tendencies through the next several decades towards a technotronic era, a dictatorship, leaving less room for political procedures as we know them. Finally, looking ahead to the end of the century, the possibility of biochemical mind control and genetic tinkering with man, including beings which will function like men and reason like them as well, but they're not. They're humanoids. Could give rise, he says, to some difficult questions, you bet, like how are we going to survive? I'm about to share with you the expose of the cryptocracy and oligarchy that was behind not simply the human genome heist, but also the sickening anthrax mailings scam. I was the first researcher in the United States to contact the FBI concerning the anthrax mailings. Here was my orientation. Here's how I got involved. I've been studying anthrax for about 3 years. I've been collecting clips. You know, when CIA does their investigations, basically they gather intelligence from all the sources, and they have files and files, some clippings from various newspapers, what authors, various authors' rights. Therefore, if you're an author, for example, that's on cutting edge in this room right now, and you're divinely inspired, and the Creator's giving you blessings, and then you begin to write and you put out your information, no doubt that information is going to end up in a CIA file somewhere or an MI6 file, and that will then help to determine what their response strategy is going to be. So I was now following anthrax. I had files on anthrax for years and saw some really suspicious things when the FDA, in an unprecedented maneuver, selected Cipro, Bayer Corporation. Bayer, of course, was one of the founding organizations for IG Farben, Germany's leading industrial organization that, for all practical purposes, was the Third Reich. Top SS were directed by Schmitz, Hermann Schmitz, who owned more shares of Rockefeller stock than any of the Rockefellers did individually. So anyway, Bayer, Aspirin Corporation, here you see the Bayer logo. You see the Bayer logo? You think it's a coincidence that it's a red cross? Okay? And the original Bayer symbol was a lion, which is the royalty's symbol, with its paw over the globe. Okay? That's a mistake. That's just a coincidence. There's nothing conspiracy-oriented about that. So Bayer, I saw FDA unprecedented of all the antibiotics to combat anthrax. I mean, you could kill anthrax with garlic for virtually pennies. Doxycycline, tetracycline, all of those, for pennies you could get rid of anthrax. They chose to endorse the deadliest of all antibiotics, never been tested on people less than 18 years of age, had a horrific level of side effects, and the most expensive thing, it was ridiculous, a 60-day supply was $700. So I saw that already. It was about 2 years before this scam. I then was watching television, I think it was around September 27th. Of course, September 11th, 2 weeks later, right? September 11th, attack in America. 2 weeks later now I'm watching ABC News with Peter Jennings, who is a counterintelligence propagandist infiltrated from Canada, who says to American public, ends his Wednesday night broadcast, this quote: "Tomorrow we're going to go into anthrax. We're going through your fears, one by one, day by day. Good night." End quote. I kid you not. Get it? Look it up. You know, that wasn't as startling, though, as Tom Brokaw, 2 weeks later, holding up a bottle of Cipro on national, news, prime time, with the backdrop, get the segment, New World Order, holding up Cipro saying, "In Cipro we trust." Kid you not, it's reality. So I contacted, after I saw Peter Jennings that night, knowing all this, I contacted my FBI. Kevin Dunton in Coeur d'Alene. Of course, FBI in northern Idaho is very active. Why? Because all my Jewish friends back on the East Coast say, "What are you, nuts? A Jew moving to northern Idaho? Don't you know there are Nazis there?" I tell them, of course, somebody's got to go keep an eye on them, So the bottom line is, the real Nazis that we have in northern Idaho are like the pawns. The movers and the shakers live in the high rises of New York and Berlin. They were the ones who fund the Looney Tunes, that maybe a dozen of them in northern Idaho, that gets the national press. Okay? So we have we do have one of the world's leading Nazis in our area. It's a neighbor of mine up there who I royally exposed in the book Death in the Air. His name is Klaus Gronke, good friend of Henry Kissinger's. Okay? We royally exposed him. But, and he deserved it. I mean, on his front yard, he's got SSS 666, that it's like a windmill. When the wind shifts, the S's have like little pivots. They cross over, forming two Nazi swastikas, or two double X's. And this is on a front yard. So he just lays it right out in front of your eyes. So at any rate, and by the way, when I exposed that fellow, at the same time I exposed Ian Fleming's series of novels being, the 007 novels, being counterintelligence propaganda royally, because it was The View to a Kill. You remember that video, View to a Kill now. Go get it someday. Look at it, because it's true. The story is about Maxim Corporation, M-A-X-X-A-M, Maxim, double X in the middle, as again, 66. Like Phillips 66, Route 66, America's highway, At any rate, I'm not going to go into that. It's a different presentation. But I called the FBI. I called Kevin Dunton. I got that. Kevin Dunton, FBI agent, not in command, but I think second in charge of the Coeur d'Alene office, very active in seeking out Nazis. And I said, you've got an anthrax scam unfolding in the United States right now, the origin of which relates to the Bayer Corporation, Hermann Schmitz et al. And his progeny, directors of that company, which essentially is intimately linked to the Nazis you've been investigating. You better get on this. I didn't hear from them. So the next day, Thursday, I drove down to Coeur d'Alene. I marched into the FBI office, and I delivered a copy of the book Death in the Air along with a paper that I wrote for him to immediately alert every single FBI agents at the highest levels. Get on this. This is important. Folks, that was one whole week before the first anthrax mailing was announced in the press. I beat it by a week. In fact, the day that I made the call was the day that it was mailed from Trenton, New Jersey, and a secondary one was mailed from overseas. So you would think, given that intelligence, that they would come to me with interest. Would you not? They never came. A series of additional neglected calls prompted me to begin a campaign to expose the FBI in negligence, if not being involved in genocide themselves, because within weeks you had 30,000 people in the D.C. area alone popping these magic Cipro pills and becoming chronically ill. It took several months before it came out in even the national press that about half of these people suffered long-term brain damage. And so, it was all obvious. You read the literature, read the scientific literature, read the physician's desk reference on the side effects of Cipro. You'll see it right there. They don't hide it. So it took me finally to December 13th. I think it was December 13th. Or the Monday before December 13th. I finally, after numerous letters to FBI directors and getting nowhere, I hired a computer expert to send a spider, electronic spider, into the FBI headquarters and gather the names and email addresses of as many FBI employees and agents and officials that I could gather. And we finally got about 1,500 to 1,600 of them. And I released that Monday a 25-page report to all those people and additionally 8,500 to the mainstream press. It was a 25-page definitive anthrax report. I'll go into some of the details now. But I picked up the phone that day, and there was one reporter who I respected that was doing a pretty good job. His name was William Broad from the New York Times. And I was, of course, the New York Times, I'm surprised. Washington Post and the New York Times, you might as well be a mouthpiece for the CIA. That's what they are. But Broad was doing a pretty good job. So I picked up the phone, I called, I said, Bill, I've been watching your stuff. And everybody knows my stuff. Everybody knows Horowitz. So when I pick up the phone these days, they don't hang up on me anymore. They used to hang up on me. Now they don't. They have enough respect for me that they don't hang up. So I said, Bill, let me tell you something. I really appreciate some of the things that you've been doing, but all the roads lead to Battelle. He says, you're right, I know. I said, can't you come out with that? He says, I'll see what I can do. He was just at that moment finishing a major feature article for the New York Times. Came out 2 days later. The very last paragraph of William Broad's feature stated that a principal, if not the principal, organizational suspect in the anthrax mailings was the Battelle Memorial Institute and the CIA's top secret project called Clear Vision. That came out, and that was the day the entire issue dropped from the press. It just suddenly disappeared. You remember that? That's why it disappeared. So this is the conspiracies. This is some of the background that's going on. This is nothing new. If you go back into the Capitol building in Washington, and you stand in the great dome of the rotunda, and you look up, you will see this section of this magnificent hand-painted mural, I saw this, and I took this picture the day before I briefly had an opportunity to testify before Dan Burton's Congressional Investigating Committee, looking at the links between mercury toxicity in the vaccinations and the skyrocketing rates of autistic spectrum disorders in our nation's youth. So I get to the Dome of the Rotunda building. Harkins planned for the autism ambassadors. I'm a U.S. autism ambassador, honorary. So we had a chance to tour. I now look up and I see this, and this is the god Mercury, holding in his right hand the medical staff, the tree of life with the snake twirling around it. In his left hand, you see here, he holds a bag of gold that he's putting down on legislators' desks as they are penning legislation, looking at the money. This is part of the American political system. It has been this way from its inception. Nothing new under the sun. So here's what I sent to the FBI. If you do a flow chart on the military-industrial suspects and the contractors linked to the anthrax mailings, ultimately you'll end right here. The Bush administration, the CIA, blocked the FBI's inquiry. Anytime FBI officials, and by the way, they finally did come to me. It took them 6 months before they finally came, hounding them virtually weekly. They came to me, wanting to make me a suspect in the mailings. That was the thanks that I got. Remember, they offered $1 million reward for anyone who could come up with who it was that was associated with this horrible deed. We nailed it. We know exactly who was involved. So I ran a short list of all the suspects. Ultimately, in a nutshell, you had your FBI being blocked by the CIA. The Bush administration had operated through PhRMA, the Pharmaceuticals Research and Manufacturers Association. Through their connections, Bayer Corporation was represented, the Merck Pharmaceutical Company, Aventis, the manufacturers of the smallpox and the West Nile virus vaccines were all integrated into this network. The Department of Defense was buying their stuff. Battelle Memorial Institute, West Jefferson, Ohio, was where they produced that unique, never-before-seen, unprecedented form of mailed anthrax. I mean, this was ridiculous. There's only one place in the entire world virtually that could have produced that, and it was right at Battelle Memorial Institute, West Jefferson, Ohio. In fact, some Pentagon official called it Project Jefferson. It was called, previous to that, Clear Vision by the CIA. And that, why was it obvious? Because you see that the world had never seen such a hyper-concentrated, silica-cut, electromagnetized form of anthrax to the tune of 1 trillion spores per gram. I mean, the Soviet Union in its heyday never produced anything better than 500 million spores per gram. This was twice as concentrated as the world's worst anthrax. And it just so happened that this organization had contracted with a fellow by the name of Ken Alabekov, who was the Russian defector named Ken Alabek, renamed Ken Alabek, best-selling author for the Central Intelligence Agency. The top biological weapons ace, come from Russia, defected from Russia, comes to here in America, suddenly becomes a hero with CDC and CIA and becomes a premier voice in the mainstream bioterrorism genre of writings, books, and articles. And William Patrick III, the other Battelle and CIA, both were on CIA payroll, both were Battelle contractors, the two world's leading anthrax aces, worked on the project. In fact, William Patrick III, for the Battelle Memorial Institute, which, by the way, if you've never heard of Battelle, it's kind of like a one-stop shopping mall for anything military, anything weather control, the most advanced science and technology in human and planetary manipulation. That's Battelle. Death and destruction, most advanced technologies, how to accomplish death and destruction, that's Battelle. And so these guys were contracted by Battelle and the CIA. And Battelle actually hired William Patrick III about 2 years prior to the anthrax mailings to do a whole report on precisely what would the outcome be if we mailed this particular form of anthrax.
Battelle in French means little war.
Little war, thank you. Battelle in French, little war. Well, that's well named, isn't it? So the anthrax mailing location here, Ames strain, you know, the connection between Battelle and these. In fact, Battelle sent that anthrax to Dugway Proving Grounds to test, and guess this name, in the, quote, Life Sciences Facility, end quote. Well named. You know, they flip everything. It should be Death Sciences, right? Like Centers for Disease Control actually is Centers for Disease Creation, okay? They flip everything. Everything's flipped. I mean, look at the Bible. The Bible says at 6 o'clock at night is the beginning of the day. We've got 12 o'clock. Why? Think about it. Everything's flipped. 100%. English is alphanumerically Hebrew backwards. They've got us as far backwards as they can possibly be to the truth. So that when you look at what the FBI should have been investigating, they should have been investigating the Carlyle Group. Bioport, the principal vaccine, anthrax vaccine, in fact, the only anthrax vaccine company. In fact, this whole mailings, part of the scam was not only to push forward the totalitarian legislation called the Model State Emergency Health Powers Act that gives the feds and the state governments the authority to incarcerate you under the guise of public health and national security. And the public health authorities call the shots. Forget your dime phone call to a lawyer. You are picked up by the assistants, the deputies of the state that include physicians and nurses and fire officials and police chiefs and patrolmen. They're enlisted in the scam. They're become deputized. And because the law says that no matter what they do, they grab you to quarantine you for your own health and safety under the guise of some emergency outbreak. And it's so vague in the legislation that it could be anything from a leukemia virus in one individual. They could call a state of a model emergency, Model State Emergency Health Powers Act, where then they incarcerate you, they ship you via whatever transportation means is available to quarantine camps. Now imagine a quarantine camp in an area such as this, outside of San Francisco. We're talking about huge concentration camp facilities. That's what the military bases now that have been converted into in many cases. Large quarantine camps are currently available for moving the sheeple back to the slaughterhouses.
Ready for 30 million.
30 million, yeah. Well, currently the population of the United States is 270, 280 million. They have the officials, and I've published their documentation on this, they have a desire to reduce the U.S. population by half, down to 140 to 150 million. So it's actually 125 to 140 is what they say. So ultimately, one out of every two of you need to go. What's the best, most efficient manner to do that but is to conduct pharmaceutical and slavery programs that bring you drugs that are required to be taken Essentially, vaccinations like you see taken today, causing a whole array of autoimmune diseases. The tape Horowitz on vaccines, get that if you haven't got it already. Get that. It's an incredibly important tape. It's our greatest lifesaver. The whole array of autoimmune diseases, the new plagues, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, lupus, MS, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, chronic crippling rheumatoid arthritis, adult and juvenile type 1 diabetes, Crohn's disease, Guillain-Barré, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, all vaccine-induced injuries. And so now you have a form of slavery which humanity would not know they were enslaved, just like what was called for in the report from Iron Mountain. How convenient. And then on top of that, what happens? Like you see on the evening primetime news shows. Once you start taking 1 or 2 drugs for whatever illness that you're now having to face, now you have other side effects. Now you have to take other pills. That's not life. That's slavery. In a form of slavery which humanity would not even know, perceive that they're enslaved. So Bioport and a Cambus Baxter, the producers of the smallpox and the anthrax vaccine. And of course, when you go into the scientific literature, you even go to the congressional records, as I had been doing for years. The movers and shakers in pharma were pushing with the Bush administration for the stockpiling of only 2 vaccines. My goodness, there's dozens of potential biological weapons threats. Why just 2? Well, you see, because that's what Baxter had in stock, and Acambus and Bioport. And the connections between these guys, I mean, Baxter is, you might as well have IG Farben as the name of your production company. American Home Products owner of Baxter is direct progeny right off of IG Farben, the hoax BASF group, as was American Cyanamid. So you basically now you've got Bioport and these guys supplying the federal government with $500 million. Hey, man, it only cost maybe 6 lives sending a little anthrax in a couple envelopes to, the news broadcasters down in Florida and in New York. Man, what a wonderful Machiavellian create the problem, create the solution ruse. They were standing by with this solution long before the problem. And you saw it unfold. I saw it unfolding. Bioport, look at this. Look at this. William Crowe, major shareholder in Bioport, good President Bill Clinton, owned 22% of the company just for his work in selling this vaccine to the Department of Defense. Fuad al-Hibri, the owner of the company Bioport, wealthy Saudi, rubbing shoulders with the bin Laden family. You remember in the news, somehow miraculously American troops found in Osama bin Laden's cave in Afghanistan when they invaded Afghanistan Bioport planning papers. And they alleged that this was because Bioport was anthrax production. They were concerned that Osama was worried about how to produce or investigating how to produce anthrax as a biological weapon. Hogwash. His family had invested heavily along with the Carlyle Group in Bioport. He was essentially keeping tabs on their investment. And then ultimately, who's the director of Carlyle? If you haven't studied that, you probably should read Mike Rupert's wonderful work. Carlyle, you've got Frank Carlucci III, CEO of Carlyle. 11th top defense contractor in the United States is Carlyle. Frank Carlucci III, who was a CIA director overseeing the continent of Africa at the time they released the AIDS virus. That's who directs the 11th top defense contractor in the United States. Who's their top sales director? George H.W. Bush. That's who Carlyle Group is. And that you might recall that 2 weeks after September 11th, the time at this anthrax mailing, the precise time virtually that it was mailed, you had the bin Laden family pull out, according to the Associated Press, only $1 million of investments out of the Carlyle Group. Concerned the administration was that close ties to the bin Laden family between the Bush family and bin bin Laden family might be exposed. So according to the Associated Press, which is the mouthpiece of the CIA, they pulled $1 million out and went away. But Reuters, Brits, told a little bit more of the truth. Suddenly, about, I think it was $1 billion disappeared out of Carlyle's coffers that same period. So ultimately, the connections between bin Laden and Bush administration, Bush family, through Carlyle here, was very incredible. Carlucci, James Baker III was also is the president director of Carlyle. And this is why it was that some of the fine work done in Britain in the Guardian, Greg Palast's writings, including those of interviewing FBI officials at the highest level saying, sorry, we can't do anything in this investigation of the ties between the Bush family and the bin Laden family through the Carlyle investments. Our hands are tied by CIA. And the CIA, if you study Loftus and Ahrens' wonderful works, including the book called The Secret War Against the Jews, you find that the truth is that the MI6, British Secret Service, and on behalf of the royal family of England and the German banking community, they control our Central Intelligence Agency. So if you're wondering why it is that America is getting such a bad rap these days, and why it is that we are out there becoming like the new Hitlerian society with Bush, the new Hitler, and why we are hated all over the world, because simply it fits the globalist agenda. Don't forget, on tap is one world government, one world bank, one world peacekeeping force, one world court, one world economy, and you can't have the separate nations. So they have to have at least one last final bad guy and one horrible Nazi type of a regime that the world is going to say enough is enough, give us New World Order. Now you're reading virtually the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. That's exactly what it says, released 1778. That's exactly what they've been about all these decades, is trying to produce this whole globalization effort. So, at any rate, I'm not going to go into the great details that I go into in the book, DNA, Pirates of the Sacred Spiral. Ultimately, to say this, let's move on quickly in the last 20 minutes and give you the bad news about the Human Genome Project and its links to all of these global devil doers. Tigger, isn't that a wonderful, cute name? Tigger, a little tiger. Tigger is the Institute for Genomic Research. The chief anthrax vaccine maker was Bioport, I told you, but Tigger did the DNA sequencing for the anthrax. The vaccine industry relies heavily on Tigger also with the smallpox. BMI affiliated, Battelle Memorial Institute affiliated genetic sequencing labs is Tigger. The unscrupulous director of Tigger was J. Craig Venter. There he is. Another unscrupulous doctor in this conspiracy is the previous vice president of Oravax, which came a canvas which was purchased by Merck Hoax Aventis Group, along with J. Craig Venter. These people stood to gain financially most by the decisions made by Clinton and Bush administrations to stockpile the anthrax and smallpox vaccines. These guys are really unscrupulous. I can't even go into the great detail. I don't have the time. But these are the guys that met behind closed doors. These are the guys that were at the forefront of pushing these particular technologies and medical miracles, that is the anthrax, the smallpox, as well as the new DNA sequencing technologies. Let me just move on. According to William Broad of the New York Times, Venter helped to privately form Tigger after the doctor resigned from the National Institutes of Health in 1992. Let me tell you a common scam. Common scam is U.S. taxpayers fund university professors and wonderful National Institutes of Health projects. When they come up with something that they perceive could be of great value, suddenly it's privatized. The top guys on the inside privatize the entire thing, leaving the taxpayer out, leaving the university professors and all the great doctors who dedicate their lives to this type of advancing science out in the cold, broke. Basically, it's all privatized, And the big money, the patents, are done by the inside traitors. Traitors. So this guy was like among the traitors. He departs from the National Institutes of Health, forms a 30-person staff to work for the for-profit Tigger. This group, along with affiliated officials, companies, and investors, including the leading Anglo-American political figureheads, are the pirates of the sacred spiral, the despicable Human Genome Project thieves. They privatized 2 weeks before it was to be completed in a complete outrageous scam. I'll give you the details in a minute. They completely privatized all of the DNA codes, the sequences, called the Human Genome Project, a multi-decade, billions of dollars and effort went into that project. Now, the new one is called Genomes to Life Project. This is the new one, happening now. It's a Battelle Memorial News release heralded that they had $23.3 million of the Department of Energy's funding. Department of Energy. Again, why would the Department of Energy and, quote, the London Trust be the directors of the Human Genome Project? Why? Because DNA is an electromagnetic frequency receiver and transmitter of divine harmony. It's an electrically tuned antenna. It's in spiral, just like a Tesla coil, to amplify that power of divinity. So it's all energy. Power, control is in energy. The energy industrialists want your DNA. So now let's look at some of their history. Are these guys trustworthy? I don't think so. Take a look at what I published in the book, Initially Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola, the Energy Department's cancer induction studies. What the heck does the Department of Energy have to do with developing retroviruses such as HIV/AIDS and inducing cancers in various populations, including human primates? Additional research that I did in Death in the Air showed many similar National Cancer Institute studies targeting minority and ethnic populations during the early 1970s, exactly reminiscent of the eugenics movement. What's changed? Eugenics, let me tell you, if you don't know what it means, you should know. It's in fact a tribute to counterintelligence propaganda that most Americans don't know what eugenics means. It is simply defined as the, quote, science dealing with the genetic differences between the races, including the genetic predispositions for diseases between the races. So you want to take out, as an Anglo-Saxon WASP, a particular minority group, you find out what your bloodline differs from that allegedly impure bloodline. And then you focus on their impurities with your biological weapons and your electromagnetic frequency devices. In a landmark publication, this is for the medical folks. I'm not a lone voice crying in the wilderness any longer. I might be maybe the most abrasive. But you've got the Lancet editors. Now, in the year 2002, declared that the practice of medicine is ethically and morally repugnant. They blamed the major healthcare professions, moral decay, and rampant conflicting interests that are inherent in drug company-funded health science. The editors relayed several examples of this, including one involving genetic biotechnology and vaccine development from Genentech. They asked rhetorically, just how tainted has medicine become? They answered, heavily and damagingly so. More importantly, Lancet editors asked the question I'm asking you right now. Who among you have the courage to oppose pharmaceutical funding and genocidal operations? The answer obviously is we're in a minority. Very few. My experience is that physicians and most of the university professors haven't the guts. They can't step out because ultimately they're under tracking. They're not only indoctrinated in a cult educational program tracking system that the Rockefellers initiated and direct continuously, but the Bottom line is that they're so controlled financially that they can't give up. They can't even conceive of giving up a career that they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in many cases, such as in a doctor's case, to set up a clinic, through medical school and or university professorship, to ultimately give it all up to tell the truth, to report on the inside shady dealings that every single one of them see if they get to any higher level or beyond middle bureaucracy in academia. According to the New York Times, this is a classic case of what the Lancet is talking about. Here's a description of J. Craig Ventnor. According to the New York Times, Dr. Ventnor's 82-foot-long yacht is called the Sorcerer. Remember what I said? The root word of sorcery is pharmacopoeia, pharmaceuticals. His brief biography by Lisa Belkin reads like a science fiction novel. Drugs, quote, could be made to neutralize genetic codes of infectious diseases and agents like HIV, tuberculosis, and hepatitis, like a new program on a computer. Said Belkin. Others could replace disease-prone genes of humans, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, like new spark plugs in an automobile. This was the search for the Holy Grail in the scientific book of life. This is the focus. This is a major, major focus of all of their end times bio-spiritual warfare initiatives. Just as the publicly funded Human Genome Project Consortium neared completion of its decades-old quest to tediously map humanity's genetic code, Dr. Venter, here's how the scam was perpetrated. Dr. Venter, previously working on the same project for the National Institute of Health, summoned Dr. Francis S. Collins to a special meeting. Dr. Collins, the new director of the project for the National Human Genome Research Institute at the NIH, administered by the Department of Energy at a cost of $3 billion annually in the United States alone, had not considered, the New York Times said, had not considered Dr. Ventnor a friend nor an ally. Their meeting, however, at Dulles International Airport, again, Alan and John Foster Dulles, Rockefeller lawyers and business managers. Their meeting at the airport, Dulles Airport, appeared to change the fact that they were not friends, at least for the moment, for public consumption, Belkin wrote. Few realized that corporate profiteering and the subsequent privatization of genetics patents on behalf of Ventnor's European backers was in the works. Ventnor informed Collins that his new corporate affiliates, PerkinElmer Labs, a Celera acquisition directed by British boss Mr. Tony White, and Michael Hunkapiller, Ventnor's new business partners, were poised to corner the gene patenting market using advanced technology that rapidly sequenced gene fragments. It was all a scam, a scam. This fortuitous company named Celera Genomics was set to sequence the entire human genome faster and cheaper than Collins and the NIH were planning to do. That's what they said. It was ridiculous. NIH director was allegedly persuaded in this meeting, this itself was ridiculous, to tentatively endorse Ventnor's proposal that their public and private genome investigations proceed jointly? What? Take the entire United States federal government project that has been decades old, billions of dollars in the works, and suddenly join forces with a private company? Oh, that's a good trick. And that their acquisition Applied Biosystems, rather than a public finance agency, would carry on the project. American taxpayers and university investigators that had labored, in essence, to advance the project for decades as blessings for generations to come were about to be criminally cheated. 3 days, only 3 days later, as Belkin's story went, a still stunned, this is a quote, a still stunned Collins agreed to appear at a joint news conference with Ventnor and several PerkinElmer officials. The paperwork had apparently been signed and the ruse secured. As it had turned out, Ventnor had been largely, if not entirely, bluffing. Belkin even recorded from the New York Times. The hoax resulted in the precise outcome every major Human Genome Project private investor had desired. Solera officials, as well as the publicly funded organizational directors at the highest levels of the NIH and the Energy Department and the Wellcome Trust of London. Welcome, Burroughs, welcome, pharmaceutical giant. We're all pleased the heist or hoax was worth billions, if not the future of humanity. Genetic patenting rights were now secured, privatized by inside traders, or more accurately, insidious traitors. The heist mostly benefited the Anglo-American oligarchy and their business cohorts. It was the quintessential biological gold rush that just happened, and most of you never even knew it was occurring. Belkin's story was incomplete. Here are some facts that you should know, especially as conspiracy investigators. Mr. White left Baxter to lead the newly formed Perkin-Elmer. He arrived amid shareholder rebellion, according to Andre Pollack at the New York Times. Quote, an investor group that was led by who? George Soros. If you don't know anything about George Soros, he virtually personally engineered the great economic collapse of Asia about a decade ago. This is the man who runs the Quantum Fund, the world's leading producing fund. I mean, they average about 35% at least annually to their investors. Now, who are George Soros' investors? George Soros' investors are only 99. Completion. 99 is 18. 1 plus 9 is 9. Completion. 99, flip it around, 66. When you study my book, Death in the Air, you'll see that the alphanumerics of the Rothschilds is different from the Rockefellers. The nouveau riche were assigned to 66s. America is being controlled by Rockefeller Foundation. The patents on all of the genetics went to Rockefeller University. Most of those patents are going to fund Rockefeller University by no accident. But Route 66, read the book, was created by the Rockefellers as to be America's highway. The Rockefellers are assigned 6s. Exxon is XX 66. The Rothschilds are operating at the highest levels, 9s, 99. George Soros directs 99 of the world's wealthiest European aristocracy. He is their money manager. This is the guy who stole the Human Genome Project. Yep. Mr. White met with the investors and said it was too late to do anything about his hiring. You ought to try to let me make some money for you, he said. And that's precisely what he did. Well, now, photographed here, courtesy of the Carnegie Corporation. Carnegie Endowment, in my last lecture, you missed it. The beginning of the book, DNA, Pirates of the Sacred Spiral, you learned that the Carnegie Foundation was given directorship over all of the world's, the international propaganda mill, whereas the Rockefeller Foundation were given the domination over the propaganda within every aspect of American culture, including the health sciences. But here, photographed courtesy of the Carnegie Corporation of New York, from left to right, you see Ted Turner, you see Bill Gates Sr., you see George Soros next to David Rockefeller, Director of Council and Foreign Relations. CFR, major mover and shaker in the United States sub-political system, is David Rockefeller. Obviously, they were acknowledged here for their leadership in philanthropy. Now, Tigger, like Bioport LLC, could earnestly be called an Anglo-American venture. These firms, along with BMI, were mutually reliant in working to benefit primarily the British-German oligarchy. Again, the Human Genome Project was a $3 billion annually funded program that fueled the giant federal and global bureaucracy, including thousands of researchers worldwide, all administered by the U.S. Department of Energy and London Trust. Again, think about it. It would be politically impossible for Dr. Francis Collins to be virtually solely responsible for the swindle such as this. How could that one man make all these decisions? without having the political and economic repercussions. Impossible. The directions and approvals would have had to have come from the Department of Energy officials and their higher-ups, their governors, the devil doers within the now Global Atomic Energy Commission. Now, we no longer have an American Atomic Energy Commission. Now it's a Global Atomic Energy Consortium operating on behalf primarily of the European benefactors. At any rate, the licenses, as I said, on most of the human genome patents are being granted now to pharmaceutical companies and Rockefeller University. What are the implications of this? Both the Human Genome Project heist and the anthrax mailings mystery pointed to the same conspirators. The British-based conspiracy involving BMI, Celera, Bioport, other major pharmaceutical and vaccine makers, and through the Carlyle Group, the Bush family, and the CIA. Among the implications of this obviously advancing electrogenetic population control program is that you've got genetic sequences that are definitively identifying predispositions for diseases and susceptibilities within the general population. That's you and I. Given the ageless battle between good versus evil, the forces of adversity seek unbridled power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. These are the top energy industry power officials. They want to have total spiritual power control. And that BMI, Department of Energy, Genomes Project for Life is this program now, ultimately places this unprecedented global control power over life and premature electrogenetically directed death in the hands of a British-German cryptocracy that has been responsible for the last several wars, if not the last several centuries of wars. George Soros, I told you about. I don't need to spend any more time with him. What are the conclusions? Well, we initially broke the codes. We did that for the Creator in service to humanity. The Creator wants you to know what the codes are because ultimately it is the codes and the truth that shall set you free. In Death in the Air, we introduced the concept of biospiritual warfare that we're talking about using frequencies and genetics. We exposed the links to Project HARP, the electromagnetic frequency antenna. Allegedly, the government's website states is beaming ionospheric heater apparatus, frequencies to heat up the ionosphere. Can you imagine heating up the atmosphere in an age of global warming? Hogwash. This type of technology is principally for genetic, electromagnetic, bioacoustic, ultimately biospiritual warfare. The whole Star Wars program, the videotape that we produced called Star Wars Weapons and End Times Warfare also goes into the concept of Star Wars technologies being utilized again for biospiritual warfare, specifically using frequencies directed at DNA and the genetics. So what are the conclusions? With DNA prior to the sacred spiral, we must consider the complete alteration and extermination of the human race as part of the agenda. Did you get that? That is part of the agenda. Why? Because you're blessed divine creatures. You're holy children of the great Creator. The satanic beasts operating currently have a great jealousy of the great divine Creator and His ultimate power. The great war of good versus evil involves taking everything that the Creator has done and undoing it. You are among those to be undone according to this program. So that's what you need to understand. If you have not become active yet, would you say that it's time to become activated? And doing everything possible that you can do to wake up those who have ears to hear this type of information and eyes to see the documentation that supports the truth of it? So it's really time to get personally activated. I'd say don't waste your time with politics. Hand to hand, person to person, saving one person at a time. That's one of the conclusions. Today, a handful of energy industrialists, power control freaks, through their global corporations and philanthropic institutions, virtually controlling everything from bank transactions to space-based weaponry, are the enemies. The other issue that you've got to understand is you've got to get into the Messiah's philosophy and truth of forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. You've got to operate on a level of forgiveness, because if you lose that, ultimately you become victim of their power. So you can't go there. You can't go to violence. You go to love. You go to forgiveness. They're sick. They're not human. They've lost their humanity. They've lost that spark of decency instilled by parents who are apparently more traumatizing than loving. If their pledging programs involve mass killings and slaughter and kissing dead, skulls, and if that's how they get their kicks in college, you can imagine what they did in adolescence and beyond. So these are not human beings that we're dealing with. If you want to entertain notions of aliens, fine. I have no problem with that. It's a whole other issue. The bottom line is the human race, as well as all of the other organic species, are in great, great danger. What do? Focus on service. But don't knock your heads against the wall. Some people don't have the ears to hear this. Let them go. You got to drop out of this whole insane system as quickly as possible. It's literally time to set yourself up in the most sovereign, insane way that you can possibly get yourself. Research, read, find out what you specifically need to do to follow your own unique destiny, which is of spiritual service to the Creator and humanity. Focus on that service. And then ultimately, you will be doing your part. You will not die prematurely so long as you hold that focus of your life. We moved to Hawaii, and I dropped out of Babylon. I dropped my radio show because, I was so focused on the conspiracies. I was so focused on the devil doing. And yet I realized that everybody wants to bring heaven to earth. But yet if we constantly focus on Babylon and the insanity and the lunacy and the Ayatro genocide of this insane planet at this point, that means we're not studying heaven, are we? We need to focus on what heaven is. So I've spent the last year and a half focusing on what heaven is. And honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I tell you that that is where we all need to focus 100% of the time. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for joining us in the front line of the greatest crusade humanity has ever seen. Be blessed, be strong, and be loving and forgiving. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.